And now on Book TV, we're live at Books and Books bookstore in Coral Gables, Florida, with author and humorist Dave Barry. Mr. Barry is the author of over 30 books, including Dave Barry Slept Here, Dave Barry Hits Below the Beltway, and most recently, Best State Ever, A Florida Man Defends His Homeland. Dave Barry, live on In Depth for the next 3 hours, gets underway now.
Author Dave Barry, let's begin where you begin in your book, Best State Ever. What the heck is wrong with this state of Florida?
Well, we do have a reputation for stupid, weird people. And there are many stupid, weird people here doing stupid, weird things. But my argument is it's not our fault. The example that I give, and I know this may offend you personally, and I apologize ahead of this, but there was a famous example of Florida craziness a couple of years ago, where a woman was driving south on the overseas highway, connects Miami to Key West, and she's, according to the Florida State Highway Patrol report later filed on this incident, was in a hurry to get to Key West because she wanted to see her boyfriend. She was eager to see her boyfriend. And she wanted to shave her bikini region in preparation for the big reunion. So a lot of people would pull off to the side of the road to do that. But she, again, was in a hurry, so she outsourced the steering of the car to the person who was the passenger, who turned out was her ex-husband, which is very Florida detail. So they're going south. She's operating the accelerator, and he's steering the car, and she's shaving. What could go wrong, right? So the car in front of them, in a 1 in a million fluke occurrence, slows down. And they ram into it, and there's a big accident. And this was international news once it got out. You know, like, my God, did you read about this woman in Florida? She's shaving herself. That woman was from Indiana. Okay? She was shaving her Hoosier, and yet Florida got the blame. Florida. My point is, we're like Ellis Island here, except instead of the tired and the poor, we get the insane people from other states. If somebody decides he wants to get naked and pleasure himself into a stuffed animal in Walmart, he doesn't do that in Ohio. He doesn't do that in Pennsylvania. He comes to to Florida to do that, and then we become internationally known. But a lot of times, you look at these instances, a lot of these people, we're a transient state, and a lot of people come here to just be weird. So
you write that Florida has become the joke state, the state everybody makes fun of. If states were characters on Seinfeld, Florida would be Kramer. Every time it appears, the audience automatically laughs, knowing it's going to do some idiot thing.
Yeah, we got that reputation. It used to be more just Miami. For many years, people mocked Miami. I've been a long time defender of Miami, and I even had bumper stickers made up that said, "Come back to Miami, we weren't shooting at you." Years ago, in the Miami Vice days. But then it sort of expanded to the whole state. And it happened, you can trace it directly to the 2000 presidential election, where every other state was able to determine fairly quickly whom it had voted for president of the United States. But we didn't do it, early in the night, they called it for Gore, then they called it for Bush, then they called it for Gore again. Then briefly, I think William Shatner was leading down here. And at the end of the night, they were shooting heroin on television. Nobody knew who we had voted for. And then we had that 4-week, 5-week period where all anybody talked about was the Florida, because they were still counting the votes, and they would show that every night some poor Palm Beach County election official looking at a ballot that had been chewed by weasels or something. What was this person thinking when he did this to this piece of cardboard? I proposed at the time a Florida voter-proof ballot, because apparently it was just too much for Florida voters to figure out how to punch a hole in a piece of cardboard. And so my ballot idea was you would print photographs of the candidates' faces on the ballot, and you'd vote by poking out your candidate's eyeball. But had we done that, probably a lot of voters down here would have poked out their own eyeball, so we didn't do it. But anyway, that's when it started. That's when Florida became the joke state. And then all this, every time anybody in Florida does anything, it makes the news. And morning radio stations all around the country would probably have nothing to talk about if it were not for Florida. So we're providing a service, providing entertainment for the rest of the country.
Well, on the short drive from the airport down here to Books and Books in Coral Gables, there's a couple things I noticed that I wanted to ask you about. I saw a lot of...
You drove?
I drove from the airport down here to Coral Gables.
I don't recommend this as a way of getting around. When I first got here, I thought like, the way people in Miami drive, I thought, these people don't know the law. And I now know that everybody in Miami is driving according to the law of his or her individual country of origin. There are many, many different interpretations of what a stop sign might mean. But it doesn't mean stop in Dade County, Florida. That's the last thing it means. Anyway.
Well, I saw quite a few slip and fall lawyer billboards.
That's our major industry.
Massage parlors.
Yeah.
And plastic surgery centers.
Those are big ones, all big ones. Reptile sales also. If you need like a butt enhancement and a venomous snake at 2 a.m., and it's going to be just minutes away. It's like Starbucks down here. But we do, and yeah, the lawyers are everywhere. Basically, if anything happens to you down here, there's a number to call right away, and you'll get millions of dollars. So it's another wonderful reason to live here.
You also write in Best State Ever that every group that comes to Florida, immigrant groups, they have their own foreign policies.
Yeah, well, Miami does have a foreign policy and has for many, many years. And it's kind of lessened a little bit now that we've opened our relationships a little bit with Cuba. But that's still a pretty big issue in Dade County politics, is where you stand on Cuba, which is not true, I think, most cities. A lot of cities are thinking about like sewers and stuff. And we're not. We're thinking about Cuba.
How many times have you run for president?
Oh, it's hard to keep track. And it used to be considered a joke, but not so much lately. Not so much lately. No, I pretty much am always running. I don't put years on the bumper stickers, just because it saves money. And my candidacy mostly consists of accepting cash contributions. Not that that's that different from other candidacies, but I do have policies on some issues. I mean, I'm glad to share my policies with you if you'd like. Yes?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, well, healthcare. I think the highest, and there's a lot of discussion about Obamacare. Do we repeal? Do we replace? What do we do? If I were president, my highest priority would be to get the medical profession to find a way to get to the prostate gland other than the way they're getting to it now. Well, I like a procedure where the doctor would stand like 85 yards away and goes, "Looks good from here, Dave." And then
immigration, a big issue here.
Okay, there's big issue, a lot of discussion, and President Trump's issue is the wall, because he's going to build the wall. How's he going to pay for the wall? I don't think we need a wall. What I would do if I were the president, I would take the Florida Department of Transportation, send them down to the border and say, repair the roads between us and Mexico. No one will ever get through again. Okay?
In your book, Money Secrets, you write, Social Security problem number 1, the younger generation is, with all due respect, worthless. Social Security problem number 2, there are too many baby boomers.
Yeah. I agree with both those statements. You want me to respond?
Yes, just you can add on.
I feel really bad. I mean, I'm old now. Not older, I'm old. I'm an old person now. And I realize what, we have done with Social Security. We're putting this huge burden on the generations following us, as we have with the environment. We do whatever we want, and we're leaving. And I honestly, think, well, there's going to be a lot of problems after I'm dead. So the hell with it, is my feeling. Payback for hip hop is what I think.
You have a chapter about Donald Trump in your book, Money Secrets.
I did.
And you wrote it in 2006.
I read his entire book on
The Art of the Deal?
No. It was how to make $1 million. Something about getting rich. It was after The Art of the Deal, and it was even more shallow. It was basically, Donald Trump with a lot of bullet points about how great Donald Trump is. It's not unlike really how he is now, but there weren't a lot of specifics about just that he really he demands excellence from everybody. Like when he picks out silver patterns for his hotel, he gets the best silver pattern. That's the kind of tip that he had in there. And I'm thinking like, oh, if I had a hotel, I wouldn't really, need any more tips, I don't think. I would just...
And this book is from 2006, and here's what you write. In 2000, Donald Trump considered running for president, and he had some terrific ideas, but then he decided not to because that would have been a pathetic joke. Just kidding. He decided not to because he is too darn blunt for politics.
That's right. He came here to Miami. Now, I don't remember whether it was before or after I wrote that book, but I followed him around for a day, and he was, again, exploring it. And I do remember one thing he said. He was comparing himself to various presidents. And he said, like, has any of the presidents of the United States made himself into a billionaire? I don't think so. And like, basically, he's like Abraham Lincoln, loser, right? He didn't. So, yeah. Well, we're just beyond the realm of humor nowadays. People say to me all the time, this must be so great for you, And I go, no, because the idea with humor is you take something that everybody kind of recognizes as real and exaggerate it and make it absurd. But he's already doing that. You don't need me, it's like a brilliant piece of performance art. Unfortunately, he's also really the president, but if you look at it just as performance art, it's incredible.
What's the year in review?
The year in review, every year, and I've done this for many, many years. I do it for the Miami Herald, but it also runs in the Washington Post and other papers. I take the year that is just, actually, I have to turn it in like late November. So I have to make up December. That's the kind of journalism I practice. Fake news, I would call it, if I had to come up with I was in fake news way before it was cool. I take the events of the year that really happened and try to make a funny narrative out of it. And I've done this for many, many years, and people like it a lot. A lot of people, somebody here today just mentioned it. And so but I have to take the year, and every year it's the same process. I get a list of the headlines for the year, and I go through it and I go, my God, this was horrible. It's like terrorist attacks and natural tragedies and mass slayings, and there's nothing funny. And yet I'm supposed to make it into a funny narrative. And in the end, I figure out a way to do it, often by just leaving out stuff that was really too depressing to write about. But it's a big project. It's probably the biggest project I do every year, which is kind of pathetic now that I think of it, but it is.
How long does it take to write it?
The truth, it takes a couple months. I'm doing other things along the way, but that's kind of nagging at me starting in September and through the end of November. That's the main thing I'm thinking about and trying and working on. And then it's all over real fast. It's like, God, this is depressing, this conversation.
Well, your year in review 2016, it's entitled "What the ... But you, in many times, try to avoid November in here.
Yeah. I kept approaching November
skip it.
And then skipping to December or going back to the previous month just to avoid confronting what actually happened in November, which America is still not processed what happened, and we're not even close. My wife and I were talking about this morning. Are we ever going to just settle back down in this country? I don't know. I don't know that we are. I think is it going to be 4 years of everybody being like, all the time? All the time? I mean, I'm in the news media. A lot of the people I know are newspaper people, a lot of them. And they're all still, kind of all the time.
When did you give up your weekly column?
A long time ago. I stopped writing a weekly, I think in 2005. Now here's where I get defensive and explain that I still work for a living. But I still write a lot. I write books, and like last year, 2016, I went to Iowa and wrote about the Iowa caucuses. I went to New Hampshire and wrote about the New Hampshire primaries. I went to both political conventions and wrote about those. And I went to the Olympics in Rio and wrote every day for a couple of weeks from there. So really, I work a lot harder than you do, Mr. Television Man with a tie, asking when I retired.
From your 2010 book...
It's like coal mining, but harder. I'm like,
I'll mature when I'm dead. You write that political conventions are excellent places to observe VIP area lust because they're teeming with high-level Washington-dwelling people who have chosen careers in public service specifically to avoid having any contact with the actual public.
This is, yeah, I agree. Even though I wrote that statement, I agree with it completely. Washington is all about status and power, and there is no more clear example of that. It crystallizes at the political conventions, where all of these people who are obsessed with power and prestige and privilege come together and have to figure out ways to exclude as many people as humanly possible and thereby justify their own power and prestige. And when I was specifically talking about there, well, I can't remember, I think it was 2004, political convention in Philadelphia, the Republican convention, I think.
It was 2000.
2000? Okay.
For the Republicans in Philly.
Okay, so I'm there, and I usually go, I have a posse of cartoonists, because they're the only people that are as trivial and shallow as I am in the journalism field. Well, it used to be. Now it's pretty much everybody on Twitter. But so we made it our mission to get into parties that we were not invited to, and that's kind of the sport of going to a convention. Because like the lowest form of human at a convention is a delegate. The delegates are the people who stand there holding up whatever stupid sign they were handed, wearing stupid hats. And nobody pays attention to delegates. You know, they're not important. It's, you know, the VIPs that are important, and they have a lot of receptions and parties that you're not invited to. So anyway, there was this reception for somebody somewhere, and we were just determined to get in, and we did. We talked our way past the initial door people, and we're in this building now. But then there's another VIP area that's harder to get into, and we couldn't get into that. But then we went into this, there was this room, and it was, I'll never forget, it was a strange room. It was a fairly large room, like a ballroom, and in the middle there was a platform, which I guess had been used for speakers or a band or something, but it was kind of in the middle of the floor, like a raised, maybe 2-foot-high platform, maybe the size of a ping pong table, not that big. So we got up on it, there's like 4 or 5 of us, and we found these cones that janitors use to keep you from you know, getting on a wet floor. And we put a cone on either side of the thing, and we stood up on this. And when people would wander through, people who were attending this, we'd say, "You can't come up here. This is a reserved area." And the first few people like, nah. But then finally people started coming over. And they go, why can't we get up there? And we like, "You can't. This is for us. This is reserved." But then, who was it? Dick Armey, who was then like, it was like the
Majority Leader of the House.
Majority Leader of the House of Representatives came in. We go, "Dick Armey, do you want to get up on the?" And he goes, "Sure." And he got up with it. So now it's like a cartoonist and me and Dick Armey. So all these Republican VIPs come in and they see Dick Armey. They don't know what it is, but he's up on this thing, you know. And now suddenly they really do want to get up on the platform with us. And we're manning the edges of the perimeter, you know, and we're very selective who we let up. And we say, "Dick, do you know this person?" You know, and if you go, "Yeah," we'd let him up. And he was totally getting the joke. And if, of course, if it was a hot woman, she could get up. So now it's hot woman, Dick Armey, and various VIPs. And it's getting more and more crowded up there. And more people are coming in this room and want to get onto the, and it was a wonderful night, really. I wrote about it the next day. It was like one of the great nights for the convention for me. But it really was, in a nutshell, what Washington is all everybody trying to get up on this completely arbitrary little raised platform.
Common theme, Dave Barry, in a lot of your columns, your 30-plus books, cable news. Are you a fan of cable news?
Well, yeah. I mean, I watch cable news because most of the network news now consists of, like, you know, celebrity, you know, gardening tips. You know, there's like not so much news. When I wake up in the morning, I turn on, like, you know, the Today. No offense to the Today Show, I love the Today Show, especially when they have me on it to promote my my books. But it's generally, you know, it's like, and here's 38 seconds of news followed by 27 minutes of celebrity gardening tips. Whereas, like, if you want to watch the news, you go to CNN, you go to MSNBC, or you go to Fox. And I watch all of them because I find it fascinating that none of them is trying to be unbiased anymore, in my opinion. You know, Fox is like completely pro-Trump and he's going to present it. CNN, they're subtler about it, but they hate him. Like NBC hates him. Morning Joe, which is a good show, I like that show. But everybody on it is, biased one way or the other. There isn't any show that I feel like anymore is presenting unbiased news. I don't even know what unbiased news means anymore. It's just so hard to find. So.
At what point did you know that you were a humorist, that you were funny in your life?
Well, there were two things. I mean, when I thought I was funny was really young. I was, my family valued humor more than any other quality in a human being. My parents were funny people, so I thought I was funny as a kid. I got the joke. Whatever, we were into sarcasm heavily in our family. Nobody ever said anything he or she actually meant ever. When I thought I could make a living as a humorist was way later. I wrote humor columns for my high school newspaper, for my college newspaper, got a job at a newspaper when I got out of college, where when I could, I wrote a humor column, but that's not what they paid me to do. They paid me to go to, incredibly dull municipal meetings, some of which are still going on, like about sewage. So I wasn't, and then I was still writing this little humor column, and I left journalism altogether for a while and taught effective writing seminars to business people. That was my job. But I was still writing a weekly humor column for this little paper in Pennsylvania. By then I'm in my 30s, and it still doesn't occur to me this is a job I could have. And then what really changed it for me was if somebody had said to me, at the beginning, you could have a job where all you do is write humor, that would have been my goal, but it never occurred to me that was possible. That did happen to people I knew, like Art Buchwald had happened to, but I didn't think it was going to happen to me. And then my son was born, and I'm writing a weekly humor column, but the Philadelphia Inquirer, an editor there named Dave Bolt for the Sunday magazine, the Philadelphia Inquirer, I'd read a couple of my columns and said, maybe you could submit some stuff. So I submitted some things that the Inquirer ran. But then I wrote this big, long humor piece about the birth of my son. And this was 1980 when he was born. And the baby boomers were just in the process of taking over the world at that time. And the thing about the baby boomers is, as everyone knows, we're very special and there's nobody like us, and there'll never be a generation like us because we're so freaking special. And one of the special things we did was have babies. Nobody had ever had babies before, certainly not the way we had them. The way we had them, when I was born, the old system was, the mother had to be there. Father was not anywhere near when it happened. Mother was there, but they gave her a lot of drugs. She didn't wake up till the child was in third grade. So nobody really participated in the baby having process except the medical personnel. They got the baby out and woke the mother up and showed it to the dad who was out smoking cigarettes in the waiting room, if he was even around. And that was the old system. A lot of people were born under that system. Abraham Lincoln, But our system was natural childbirth, where everybody really was going to appreciate it and enjoy it, and it would be natural, and there would be no drugs involved. And we went to classes on how to have a baby, which I don't know how people did it before, because we had classes, and they would discuss, and they would pass around a model of the cervix to admire, and you don't know where that thing has been, it's been there. But the main thing they would talk about was contractions, and they never used the word pain, never. And we're like, okay, contractions. It sounds very medical and clinical. You're gonna have contractions, and when the contractions come at certain points, and you can breathe a certain way, and your husband will coach, and it just sounded like it was gonna be really great, natural. So then, of course, you actually get in there, and it's, in the area where the women are having the babies, and it's all like, ah! You're screaming in pain, begging for drugs, And so I wrote an essay about that, about the contrast between the classes and the actual childbirth. And David Bolt, the editor, ran that in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And it was instantly, there was no such thing as viral then because there was no internet, but it went as viral as something could get in the newspaper world back then. All the newspapers back then had Sunday magazines. And Sunday magazines were always looking for content, and they would exchange. So they'd see if somebody else ran a piece that they were interested in, they would, and everybody, because now, like I said, journalism was now being taken over by people my age. So they all were going through the same thing. They all had babies, and they all thought this was, pretty funny. So I started getting calls. I'll never forget the first call I got. This is, again, I'm working, teaching effective writing seminars. That's my job. And the Philadelphia Inquirer had paid me, I believe, $350 for that piece, which was a lot of money for me to get for writing something. And I got a call at home from the Chicago Tribune, the editor of the Chicago Tribune Sunday magazine. And he said, I read your piece in the Inquirer. I thought it was great. I'd like to print it. And I go, great. And he goes, well, how much do you charge? And I'm thinking, well, I already made $350. So I said, well, how about $50? And he said, we'll pay you $500. And I'm thinking, like, well, if I had only said like 25, he might have gone up to 1,000. I don't know. But, and then that process was repeated with a bunch of, not always with that extreme, but I suddenly discovered, oh, this is, and they all ran it, and then they all said, what else have you written? I said, well, I write this little column for the daily local news in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And they said, well, send it to us. And so that suddenly, really based on that one story, within a couple of months, I was in a lot of papers, and people knew who I was. The editors, magazine editors knew, including one down here in Miami, at the Miami Herald. And then, within a fairly short time, I was offered jobs at newspapers and took a job here in Miami. So I went from being a guy writing a column kind of almost as a hobby. The Daily Local News, which was the little paper that ran it weekly, was paying me $23.50 a week. And that was, my actual income was coming from teaching writing. To suddenly I was a humor writer. But it kind of happened to me. It wasn't like I set out to, if I write just the right piece, I'll get in all these markets. I didn't think that way. So it was more like it happened to me, and it was wonderful when it did. It was very much unexpected, though.
Were you good at teaching effective writing to business executives?
I was good at teaching it. They were not that good at learning it. No, like, here's the thing. It's probably still true. I don't know. But, like, the people, our clients, were engineers, chemists, auditors. There were people who didn't, they were intelligent people and educated people, but they didn't write for a living. They didn't think of themselves as writers, so they wrote the way everybody in their company wrote. And everybody at every company in America wrote the same way back then. I don't know if it's still true, which is if you had something really, really important to say, and you had discovered, like, you had figured out a way after 3 years of testing and experimentation, you were like DuPont employee or something, you'd figure out a way to manufacture this plastic for 27 cents a kilogram cheaper than before, and you could save the company $384 million a year without any, without doing much at all, just changing a formula. The way you would write that is you would write an 87-page document that would start, 3 years ago, we undertook a program to determine whether substituting, and then somewhere in there, it would say we could save $384 million a year by switching this to this. Never at the end where you could find it, never at the beginning where you could find it. Somewhere in there it'd be there after they dragged you through all the work they'd done and all the studies they did and it was always worded that way. And I would say to them, the first sentence of your report has to say, we can save $340 million, we do it. And they would go, no, we can't do that. And I go, why not? They go, because that's not how we do it here. and I go, but they're paying me to come in to tell you how to do it. That's how you should do it. And it was a real battle. And I would say that I won the battle 10% of the time and lost it 90% of the time. I didn't feel bad about it because I knew I was telling them and also I would talk a lot about how to, structure a sentence and, stuff like that. But I don't think I changed the way American business people write, but I did make them feel guilty anyway, which was something.
Back to your discussion about...
You know, I just want to add one thing. The thing that really benefited me personally about that part of my career, which was almost, I think, 7 years of teaching effective writing seminars, is I got good at talking to groups. Because, you know, if you walk into, you know, like you're at you know, plant in North Carolina, chemical plant in North Carolina, and a bunch of people have been told you have to go to report to this for a week. This guy's going to talk to you about writing because it was a week. And they shuffle in and sit down, and they look at me, and I looked like I was 9 years old then. You know, I had a mustache just to try to look older, and I looked like a 9-year-old with a mustache. And I would say, you know, they know, and I had to convince these people that they didn't think I knew anything, they didn't want to be there, and I had to keep their attention and try to teach them. So I just, at the beginning, I was just terrified. I would throw up before I would, you know, at the motel before I'd go in, literally. But then, you know, after a while I got better and better. I just learned to make it entertaining. They knew that there was going to be something funny coming along sooner or later, and I got better and better at speaking to groups. That turned out to be invaluable when I became a writer. Because as you probably know, when you become a writer, writing the book is, in the minds of the publishers, like maybe 50%, maybe less of the important. The important thing is going out and promoting the book, talking to groups of people, and that was a useful experience for me to have like a very unwilling audience and have to win them over. And when you get out to talk to people about your books, generally they're a willing audience, so it's a lot easier. But I felt much more comfortable doing that.
Do you enjoy the book tour?
I do. I don't like the travel part. My joke has been for many years that the purpose of the book tour is to kill the author, because that will make the book more valuable. But as it is, it can be brutal. You know, I mean, really, it can be unbelievably brutal. I will give you one example. I don't allow this anymore. I used to be much more naive about what I would allow on book tour. But the thing that I learned to avoid is we're going to have a film crew tag along, and they won't be in, they'll be completely, you won't even know they're there, you know, which is the complete lie. They make you come out of the door 3 times. You can't pee because you're wearing a, you know, but this is when I was more naive, and I was on a book tour in Seattle, and this film crew tagged along. So I get off the plane, and they're there. And, you know, this is before 9/11, so they could be right at the gate. Follow me through. I get picked up by the escort who takes you around. They're in the van with me, so we can't even have like, we can't even say hi. Well, I can say hi, but, you know, everything you say, they're, you know, don't mind us. You know, and I go around with I did a bunch of talks. I did a bunch of radio interviews, TV interviews. It's a very packed day, and I'm looking at the schedule, and I can see that there's a half an hour when at the end of the afternoon, the film crew is going to leave, and I'm going to have a half an hour in the hotel, and then I have to go do the bookstore event that night. But a half an hour, and I'm just looking forward to this half an hour all day long. And finally, it gets to the hotel, and it was agreed that they would leave me at the hotel. I check in, they're gone. Go up to my room, open the door, and there's a film crew. They had forgot to tell me that there was going to be another film crew in the hotel room to do an interview. And I walk in and I go, you know, I lost it. I go, what are you doing here? You know, and they're of course filming this, and the woman goes, you didn't know about this? It's on your schedule. And I'm thinking, no, it must change it. And I went, well, I'm really kind of angry, but I'm trying to not look angry. But I go, well, what if I had to go to the bathroom? And she goes, do you? And so that part of the book tour, that could really get wearying. But the part of the book tour I like is when you do a signing and people who are actually buying your book come to listen to you talk and buy your book and have you sign the book. And it's like there's some real people there. It's not, because like the radio, TV people, they get your book for free, and they're doing it because you're providing them with content like this, But the bookstore people, that's not them. I mean, they came because they wanted to see you. So I think every writer kind of likes to know that there are readers out there somewhere.
And good afternoon, and welcome to Book TV on C-SPAN.
Wait, we're just starting now? What was all this stuff going on?
Well, It's going to be hard to get through, I think. Welcome to Book TV on C-SPAN 2. This is our in-depth program where we talk to one author and talk about his or her body of work. This month, it's humorist and author Dave Barry. And we are at Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida, and he is our guest. He's the author of over 30 books. Here are some of them. Dave Barry Talks Back came out in 1992. Dave Barry Does Japan, 1993. Dave Barry Is Not Making This Up, 1994. Do you put your name in all your book titles?
I find it just as annoying as you do. I once proposed that the title be another damn Dave Barry book by Dave Barry, and they almost went for that, but they didn't.
Yeah, maybe your next one. Dave Barry's Greatest Hits came out in 1997. Dave Barry Slept Here, which is a history of the United States, also came out in 1997. Dave Barry Hits Below the Beltway, 2002. Dave Barry's Money Secrets, 2006. Dave Barry's History of the Millennium, so far, 2007. I'll Mature When I'm Dead, 2010. Live Right and Find Happiness came out 2 years ago. And then this year, Best State Ever, A Florida Man Defends His Homeland. How long have you been living in Florida?
31 years. As I say, I moved to Miami from the United States in 1986.
And we'll figure out where you were before that. After, want to make sure that our audience can get involved here. And this is a call-in program, as regular viewers of Book TV know. We're going to put the phone numbers up if you'd like to have a conversation with Dave Barry, 202-748-8200 for those in the East and Central time zones, 748-8201 for those of you in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. Now, if you can't get through on the phone lines and you want to try social media, @BookTV is our Twitter handle. You can send a message there. You can make a comment on our Facebook page, facebook.com/BookTV. And finally, you can send an email to booktv@cspan.org. We'll begin taking those calls in just a few minutes. Are you on social media?
Yeah. I have Twitter. I have Facebook. I have a daughter who's 17 years old, whose entire life is on Snapchat. So I mean, indirectly through her. Sometimes she takes pictures of me. And my daughter's basically friends with every other 17-year-old person on the planet, thanks to social media.
Well, what's your Twitter handle?
It's Ray Adverb.
Where did that come from?
Dave Barry, rearranged.
When did you start doing that? Because you rearranged quite a few words.
Yeah, it's really the fault of Gene Weingarten, who was my first editor here at Tropic Magazine and now is a humor columnist for the Washington Post, who is obsessed with anagrams. And he pointed out a long time ago that Dave Barry anagrammed to Ray Adverb, and I always liked that. So I used that for my Twitter handle. I don't know why. I should have just called myself Dave Barry. That's my actual name. You know that, right?
From your book, Live Right and Find Happiness, to go back to your conversation about baby boomers, above all, the greatest generation did not worry about providing a perfect, risk-free environment for their children. They loved us, sure, but they didn't feel obligated to spend every waking minute running interference between us and the world. Has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, that's still my view. My point in that essay was that my generation, I was the 60s, sex and drugs and rock and roll. That was my generation. We thought of ourselves as cooler than our parents, more fun than our parents, crazier than our parents. But when I got older and looked back, I realized that was just not true. First of all, cool and sex, drug, and rock and roll-y as we were, as soon as we had kids, we stopped and became nannies, and became the people that schedule everything their kids do and make sure their kids, always have a helmet, for every activity, including eating. And we became much more worried than we were fun. But also, when I thought back to my parents' generation, I grew up in a little town called Armonk, New York. And actually, the title of this essay was "The Real Mad Men," because it's the place where Mad Men, the TV show, is set, Westchester County, New York. And my dad commuted to New York City every day, and a bunch of my friends' dads commuted to New York City every day, and some of them were advertising people. It was that age group, that year, the people who had been through the Great Depression and World War II, who are now in the 50s becoming successful. But what I remember when I thought back about it is, even though they were parents, they had us, they had kids, they had careers and everything like that, they partied, I mean, much harder as grown-ups than my generation ever did. You know, my parents, they had parties every Friday and Saturday night, cocktail parties. The women dressed up, the men wore suits and ties. They made Manhattans. They smoked cigarettes like crazy. They ate gluten, you know, openly. And I didn't care. Now, granted, that was not healthy, and a lot of them died a lot sooner than they should have. But man, they had fun while they were going. You know, and I'm thinking like that really didn't happen to my generation. We got much more staid and nervous as we got older, and I guess it's because they had already been through, like, they've been through World War II. They've been through the Depression. They probably didn't feel that, you know, they had too much to worry about with you know, raising kids. And I think we've kind of lost that. I mean, this is not a new observation, but kids are now much more sheltered. When I was a kid, we just, I can't imagine allowing my daughter, my son, to do what I did, to have the liberty I had when I was a kid. You know, I was just gone from dawn to dusk, and my parents didn't know where I was. And I don't know, maybe that was bad in some ways, but we were sure, we had a lot of fun. We were, you know, developed a great sense of independence from that I don't know about now. These kids today.
That's it?
That's it. That's my
All right,
observation.
okay.
These darn kids today with their
From Dave Barry,
music.
slept here. Mention the 60s to any middle-aged urban professional, and he'll transform himself into something worse than one of those Depressionites, droning away about his memories until you think up an excuse to leave.
The baby boomers. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what you wrote.
I did. Well, and everybody's really sick of us, and I can kind of get why. The 60s were a long, long time ago, and I have to admit that's still the music that I prefer. I'm, you know, one of my joys in life is to tell my daughter how crappy her music is compared to the music that I listen to, and how nobody's going to still listen to her music, you know, 50 years later the way we listen to it. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but yeah. So I'm already droning away about it, aren't I?
What kind of work did your parents do in New York?
Well, my father was a Presbyterian minister, but he did not have a church. He was not a pastor. He was the executive director of an organization called the New York City Mission Society, which was an anti-poverty organization in New York that it ran all kinds of programs. It ran summer camps. Like every summer, my sister, my brothers, and I went to Camp Sharperoon in Dover Furnace, New York, or Camp Minisink in Port Jervis, New York, where we were the only kids from Westchester County. Everybody else was inner city kids. Some, like at Camp Minisink, my sister and I were the only white kids. Everybody else. Anyway, my dad ran that kind of ran that organization, and so basically his job was to get money from guilty white people and funnel it to various programs in Bedford-Stuyvesant and in the South Bronx, you know, anti-poverty programs designed to get the kids into college, that kind of thing. So he went to New York every day, just like the other dads, but his job was very different. And he was very active in the civil rights movement also. So my mom, everybody always asks, not everybody, but a question I am often asked is, where did you get your sense of humor? And my dad was a funny guy. He appreciated humor. But my mom was funny. I mean, she was funny. She was very edgy, funny. She was what they called a housewife. She had 4 kids, and raising 4 kids in Armonk, New York. So, you know, she cooked dinner for us every night. She washed the clothes. She cleaned the house. But she was funny. She was college educated. She went to the University of Nebraska. She was a stenographer in the Manhattan Project in Chicago. She worked at the the reactor in the basement. She claimed, I don't know why she would lie. She was not a person to. She claimed she once took dictation from Enrico Fermi, and she had security clearance and everything like that. But anyway, after she and Dad got married, they moved to Armonk, New York, because Dad worked in New York City, and so she was raising us in this little town, Armonk, and she was not like the other moms. I didn't notice this when I was a kid because it was the environment I was in, and it seemed very normal to me. But my mom was a very edgy lady. Like, we had a pond near our house, Hadley's Pond, and my sister and I would go swimming in it. It was one of the examples of something I would never allow my daughter to do. Just go off into the woods and go swimming, without a helmet, and a lifeguard, and some kind of insurance binder. We would just go off and go swimming. We'd go out, we'd wave to our mom out the window as we're going off, and she'd be in the kitchen. She'd open the window and go, "Don't drown, kids," and we go, "We won't." That's the kind of thing we made fun of in our family, and we. She would take us around to the little town Armonk. Armonk is now kind of a boutique-y suburb of New York City. It's a prestige address now. Then it was just a little town that was near New York, but wasn't really of New York. And it was a real small town. And like there was Brissetti's Market where you would go do part of your shopping, and then there was the A&P, you'd do some of your shopping. There was Louis Tartaglia's Cleaners, you would go. There was the drugstore. So my mom would take us around on the errands, and the tradesmen loved her because she was funny. And like we would go into a Brissetti's Market, and Ray Brissetti would be behind the counter slicing bologna, and he'd go, "How you doing, Marion?" And she'd go, "Just shitty, Ray." Like, everything was like, are we allowed to say that on C-SPAN? I don't know. I apologize. And everybody would just, so she was funny, and there was nothing she wouldn't make fun of, nothing. And I will give you an example that maybe even sound a little shocking, but it was a true story. When my dad died, we were devastated, obviously, nobody more so than my mom. And there was this service for him, but we had him cremated, and so we had this urn, and just my brothers, my sister, and my mom and I took the urn to the Middle Patton Cemetery to bury my dad. So it was raining, and it was a sad day. We're all weeping. We go there, and they've got a little hole dug for us already. So we go out there, the four of us, the five of us, and put my dad in, his urn in, and cover it up, and say some stuff, and hug each other. And we're walking away. We're all crying. It's raining. And I have my mom on my arm, and she looks down and reads one of the tombstones and goes, "So that's why we don't see him around anymore." And when we both start laughing, and we're still crying, but we're also laughing. Even in that moment, my mom, she's not going to pass up that opportunity to make a joke. So that was my mother. Now, she had her emotional issues and troubles and everything, but she was really, really funny. And I was just raised in a tradition where you don't ever take anything too seriously, and especially not yourself. That was my family's. So that's.
Dave Barry, you mentioned that your father was an ordained minister. The problem with writing about religion is that you run the risk of offending sincerely religious people, and then they come after you with machetes, you write in your greatest hits.
A long time ago I wrote that column, yeah. And I remember writing in there that, contrasting, how every religion thinks every other religion is insane. I think one of the examples I said, there was a guy in India who believed that you should drink your own urine. And over here we think that's really crazy, but we do cross ourselves before we take foul shots. Like God is going to be concerned with whether this foul shot goes in or not. And guys over there, India, they think God cares about foul shots. I don't drink my urine. So everybody thinks everybody else is crazy.
Well, let's get to calls. We're going to take calls from our audience, and we have an audience here at Books and Books. If you have a question, we have Daniela's in the back with a microphone, so just raise your hand, and we'll get to that in just a second after we hear from Allie Catherine in Bryan, Ohio. Allie Catherine, you're on with author Dave Barry.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. My question is about your sense of humor. You said you got a lot of your sense of humor from your mother and your family, but you seem to bring a lot of enthusiasm and good life to your humor. So where do you get your enthusiasm? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I guess I've always liked being able to amuse people. It's a form of, and it's a performance in a way. And I like to make people laugh. So when people are amused, I guess I get the same vibe that like a stand-up comedian gets from the audience. You're enthusiastic about it. You like to make people laugh. It's fun, when people are enjoying what you're saying. So it's very different from writing humor, which is not like that at all, because you get no feedback, no reaction at all from anybody. You're just staring at a screen and hoping that somebody out there will find it entertaining. It's more rewarding to talk to people, but it's also a little riskier because you don't know that they're going to laugh or not. But
Steve's in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Steve. You're on Book TV.
Hi. How are you? Hello.
Please go ahead. We're listening.
Yes. So I was wondering who some of Dave Barry's favorite authors are that write satire.
I can tell you easily the writer who most influenced me, and it was thanks to my father. It was Robert Benchley. And this is a guy that is almost unknown today as far as I can tell, but in the 20s, 30s was probably, if you asked literate America who's the funniest person in the country, they would say Robert Benchley. He was a brilliant guy. He went to Harvard. He was a theater critic. But he wrote just wonderfully funny, silly essays. And my dad was a huge fan of his. So we had, when I was a kid, around the house, Robert Benchley anthologies of his columns for Life magazine, for The New Yorker. And I discovered him when I was maybe 10 years old. And I started reading it. It was the best thing I ever read. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe a grown-up wrote this. They were hilarious essays. And I wanted to write like that. And from the beginning, whenever I wrote anything for my high school paper, my college paper, when I could write columns for the newspaper, I tried to write like Robert Benchley. So that's the guy more than any other. I also was a big fan of P.G. Wodehouse. My dad, again, introduced me to him when I was a kid. Later years, a lot of Carl Hyacin, friend of mine from down here. Douglas Adams, the great late Douglas Adams. I'm going to stop because I'll leave more out than I should allow in. But I just want to say the one thing about the Robert Benchley thing that I always think is important for me to remember is he wrote essays that were pretty topical. And part of the problem with that is that if you read them today, and I still do, I have Robert Benchley books in my house and I read them. A lot of the stuff you can't get anymore. The cultural reference is gone, and or it's just something that's so about a haberdasher that you don't relate to because we don't have haberdashers anymore. That's I think one of the reasons why nobody still reads Robert Benchley, and I think it's important for anybody who does humor for a living is kind of to recognize you're not going to be around. You're pretty much in whatever cultural bubble you're in. That's it. When it's over, it's over. It's you're not going to be remembered the way George Orwell is, down the road.
And a little bit later in the program today, we will show you a more extensive list of Dave Barry's favorite authors and influences. But I do want to ask you, one of the ones you sent us was Mad Magazine.
Oh yeah, well, everybody my age, I think, read Mad Magazine, and those guys were brilliant. The art was brilliant, and the writing was brilliant. I don't know about now. I have not read Mad Magazine in years. But when I was a kid, that was sharp, and it was like sharp and edgy. That Mad Magazine, the National Lampoon, and the early Saturday Night Live were like powerful influences of the humor of my generation, and still are, I think.
We have a question here in the audience. Did we get the microphone? There we go. Go ahead, if you could tell us your first name.
Paul? Paul?
Yeah.
Hi. My favorite issue of the Miami Herald is always your holiday gift guide. I just laugh myself till I'm like I can't laugh anymore. And I'm just wondering if there's any one of those insanely ridiculous gifts that stands out in your mind as more than the others?
Yeah, I have to say, every year I do a holiday gift guide, which is it's the most useless, ridiculous, stupid products, but they can't be trying. I mean, if they're trying to be stupid, some of those get in, but as a rule, our strict, and when I say our, I mean my strict policy is, if you're trying to be funny, we're not going to let you in. You have to actually think people would really want this thing, that's a much narrower universe. But I do it every year, but the one that I remember most vividly, and this is a phenomenon that happens often with the gift guide. People actually want to buy these things, usually as jokes. One year, it was duck butts. And what this was, there was a manufacturer of what are the decoys, duck decoys that float on the water that look like ducks. And the company decided that it was not realistic that all the ducks were always sitting up like this, because ducks sometimes put their heads down. Now, I can't really believe that the ducks, they're not that smart, right? They're not there going, hey, none of them are, they're all sitting up. That's a little, I don't think ducks are that. But anyway, hunters might be that stupid to believe that the ducks would think that, So they made this thing, it was a duck butt, and it was just the butt of a duck sticking up that would float in the water. So it would look like, now, if to me, the ducks up there would go, why is it not coming back up, But, anyway, so we ordered a duck butt. And what we did was, actually we ordered several, and the illustration is part of the gift guide. We always like to do a funny photo illustration. It's always a photograph. And we decided to do the duck butts in a punch bowl. So we had a big punch bowl, and we had several duck butts in it, and people looking appalled at it. So anyway, the issue runs, the duck butts are in there, and everybody in America wants to buy duck butts. All of a sudden, it's like, and there was a story, it was, I think, a Wisconsin company that made them, and they had shut down production for the winter or whatever. They had to reopen the factory to meet the demand for all these duck butts. But they were concerned that people might put them in punch bowls because the alcohol would dissolve the paint or whatever, and it would be toxic, and it could be fatal, they said. And they called me and asked me what I thought about it. And I said, well, anybody who drinks punch from a bowl with duck butts deserves to die. Anyway, so that was one of the, there's been a lot of,
My favorite was the chicken brassiere.
I don't even remember the chicken brassiere.
There's also the...
You know what? We need you to get on the mic so our television audience can hear you.
Just for the television audience, it said his favorite was the chicken brassiere.
There was the chicken brassiere. There was the inflatable toast.
Yeah, I mean, we just did inflatable toast.
Black toilet paper.
Yeah, black toilet paper makes some sense. Because you could reuse it. Nobody would know.
And the turkey leg air freshener. That was a good one also.
Oh, yeah. You've really given a lot of thought to the holiday gift guide. Yeah.
Well, let's hear from Gary in Turlock, California. Gary, you're on with author Dave Barry. Go ahead.
Hi, Dave. I want to run something by you that I thought was funny. Everybody who Trump wants gets asked about Russia. Why doesn't Trump just check with his own FBI and see if they have any Russian connections ahead of time, instead of wasting all his time having the Democrats ask all his nominees, have you had any contact with Russia? I mean, he's got his own FBI. Why doesn't he check that out?
Wait, are you saying he has the FBI?
Yeah, I mean, he's president. Can't he just ask his own FBI if any of his nominees have had any contact with Russia, instead of having the Democrats ask about that? And,
or he could just send out another tweet. And I think that's the route he's chosen to take. I want to say, about the Russians, I do have a little experience with the Russians, which I learned about 2 years ago. Ridley Pearson, who is a friend of mine and a co-author and bandmate, we wrote some books together. We went to Russia for the State Department, the United States State Department, as part of a program where they send authors to Russia in hopes of improving relations between the two countries. Clearly, it's not working. Let's hope they don't ever send us to Canada, because we'll be at war. But anyway, we went to Russia, and they don't, there's a lot of tension. And there was then, too. And the State Department gave us this, after we agreed to do it, gave us this big, thick packet of warnings about how this could happen to us. We might be hassled. We might even be picked up and detained for a little while. We will almost certainly be under surveillance. Our phones will almost certainly be tapped. Our computers could be hacked into, your hotel room, whatever. So they were really like a lot of warning. And some of those things did happen to us. We were hassled a little bit. We were pretty confident our computers were hacked into. We were reasonably confident that they were listening in our hotel rooms. But anyway, what I learned, and then I will pass along to anybody who ever goes to Russia, if you go to Russia, and I cannot stress the importance of this enough, do not eat the Mexican food. Because we went one night, we were in Moscow, and we had done an event, and we were coming back to the hotel, and we were starving, and the only restaurant open near our hotel was a Mexican restaurant, which is run by Russians who are not even that good at Russian food, to be honest. And I had what I later realized was a weaponized chimichanga. And I don't want to get too explicit here, except to say that if anybody was listening in on my hotel room that night, that person would need years of therapy. But yeah.
What was your meeting like with the Union of Russian Writers?
Oh, that was weird. When I had to learn when I was over there that Russians, especially if they're English-speaking Russians, seem just like us, but they're not. And the official Russians don't like us. They're kind of upfront about it. They think we're decadent. The Putin whole thing about we're a decadent country and we're their enemy. And and these guys were like, they said, you're going to meet with these writers. And I thought, I'd meet like writers and we'll talk about writing. And it wasn't like that at all. It was like, here's what we do here, and it's much better than what you do there. What do you do? And basically I write booger jokes. And I didn't have any, it was a little unnerving. And at one point, we were in St. Petersburg, and a big issue with them was that we had imposed sanctions on them. They were, a lot of Americans don't even remember, but we had imposed sanctions because of their involvement in the Crimea. But for the Russians, it was very personal. They were angry. They thought that we were interfering with their business and whatever. And at one point, just trying to make it a little bit more non-ideological, I asked one of the writers, St. Petersburg, it was then called Stalingrad, and there was a siege, and that went on. It was besieged by the Germans, and everybody starved, and they had to resort to cannibalism. It was a horrible, horrible time. And it wasn't that long ago in that city. And I said to these writers, does that still resonate here? Because that was not that long ago. Nothing like that has ever happened, in any city in the United States. It must, and here you are. It's this beautiful city, and it looks very normal. But this horrible thing happened right here. And the guy said, yes, it's still very much, part of our lives. People had nothing to eat for days. People ate cardboard. People ate sawdust. People ate dirt. So we did not worry about sanctions. They're like, it was really hardcore. They don't like us, is what I'm saying. At least the Russian Writers Union doesn't like American writers at all.
Well, let's hear from Norm in Puyallup, Washington. Norm, good afternoon.
Yeah, hi, Dave. I just had two questions. The first was, are you worried that Trump could put you out of business? Because who says more outrageous or funnier stuff than he does? The second question is, there was a professor at the University of Oregon who wrote a book about the dumbing down of America, and I wondered if you thought that explains some of the weird stuff going on.
Well, the first part, I think I talked about this a little earlier. It's very difficult to write humor, from my mind, about Donald Trump, because he just generally gets beyond whatever boundaries you set. He goes beyond them so often, and also there's so many people writing about him. Everybody, every night there's 27 shows doing Donald Trump jokes. So if you're in the humor business, It's pretty crowded right now, the Trump field. Dumbing down. America's been getting dumber as long as I've been alive, according to everybody. But here's the thing about that. My daughter is 17. She's in high school, and I like to think that I'm as smart as a high school student. And the last time I could actually help her with her math homework was when she was in 5th grade. And then they got into the cosine, and that was that, So if we're getting dumber, I don't know, I can't explain why my daughters and her friends are studying things much harder than we are. So we must all at some point just forget everything we learned. Is that what it is? I don't know. That's not a coherent answer, is it?
And if you'll wait for the microphone, and so we can all hear your question. We have another question from the audience. Please go ahead. Tell us your first name.
Thank you. My name is another Paul here.
Paul.
My family, friends, and I have been this part of our lives fans of yours for 2 reasons. One is your extraordinary gift for the absurd, and the other is your social commentary inside. Like, in the history of Dorothy Parker and Dick Gregory, Mort Saul, Calvin Trillin. And this combination is unique, and we've not only enjoy but value your books and your commentaries and your articles. And it just occurs to me, my question is the balance between the absurd and the social commentary. It must be something that's, even following up on some of the things you've said, challenging when, what are the tenuous grasp of reality that we all have worked to try to define has been administered a coup d'etat. And we find ourselves in this surreal world. Have you ever thought of how to seriously use your humor to counteract that?
Better?
I don't know. Whatever.
One of the things that people have often said to me over the years, and it's very flattering, and I'm not saying this to flatter myself, but people say, "You've really helped me. I was having a hard time with my son or my daughter, and we read your books together, and it brought us together." Or I went through this, rough patch that had a disease, and I read your books, and they made me feel better. And thank you. And I always think, the problem is, I would do it if it made you feel worse. It's the only thing I know how to do. So I'm always grateful when people say it makes them feel better. But I have to tell you, you mentioned Calvin Trillin, and he's a friend of mine, and he's one of my favorite writers. And I don't know why I need to say this, but I just need to get out there. Calvin Trillin and I were mugged once. Well, an attempted mugging. We had done an event, and we went to a bar afterward, and we might have had a few drinks at the bar. And we came back to his house in the village, and we're standing outside his door, and this guy comes up with a jacket, and it's like this in the pocket, right? And he goes, "Give me your money, or I'll blow your heads off." And we later on deconstructed this and thought, why would you have both guns? You wouldn't have 2 guns, As Trillin put it, if schmucks like us, you don't even need a gun. You just show us a receipt for a gun, But the way we handled that, we were action heroes. The way we handled that was, as Bud hit the doorbell and said, "Alice, let us in right now." And he didn't mug us. We successfully survived the mugging. We didn't give him our wallets. So,
Speaking of guns, in Best State Ever, you write about visiting Lock and Load.
well, yeah, here in Miami, and other places, but Miami seems an appropriate place. There in Wynwood, which is this kind of hip neighborhood, there is a place called Lock and Load, where you can go in and shoot machine guns. I don't know if that's the correct term technically for it, but they're guns where you pull the trigger, it goes, and it's like set up like it's like a restaurant. You walk in and there's a menu of how many guns you want to shoot and what kind, and then there's these attractive young ladies in T-shirts coming around and taking your order, and they have guns on the wall that you can they don't shoot, but you can pick them up and see what the guns feel like. So I did it with my cousin-in-law Ron Ungerman, and we shot machine guns. Then we walked out and were like wired for hours and hours. I would not be a good soldier, I don't think. I would be like, "Oh!" if I had to shoot guns for real.
Next call is Gordon in Syracuse, New York. Gordon, please go ahead with your question or comment for Dave Barry.
Hi, Dave. I've been a big fan of yours for years, and you've convinced me in your writing just how crazy Florida is. And I'm being forced to move to Orlando to keep together with my wife. She has to go into an assisted care rest home. And here in New York, in Syracuse, I get messed with a lot. So I always went everywhere with a German Shepherd to keep myself from being knocked down by a guy playing the knockout game. But in the assisted care home, I can't have anything bigger than a toy poodle. And that's not going to protect me. Now, I hear a lot about everybody carrying guns in Florida. And I've just the other night, there was an article at Salon.com about this crazy new stand your ground law in Florida. And I have COPD and osteoporosis and osteoarthritis. And as fast as I can run away, I look like I'm standing my ground. And so I was talking to a guy there who does carry a gun, and he convinced me I should be carrying a Glock 42 stainless steel in .380 auto. What caliber do you carry?
I don't have a gun. I'm assuming everyone in my neighborhood does. So, no, I don't own a gun. We do have a stand your ground law here, which, if I understand it correctly, means you can shoot anybody you want as long as you are standing on the ground. That seems to be the way we do it. But yeah, there's a lot of guns here. When I first moved to Miami, this was in the 80s. It was during the cocaine cowboy era, and I remember driving and seeing cars go by with bullet holes. I don't know if anybody here has seen bullet holes. And at first I didn't believe that was really what it was, but that's what it was. There were a lot of shootings, not so much anymore in Miami, as far as I know, but that was going on.
Where's the line when it comes to humor and real life, and do you feel that you've ever crossed that?
I mean, are you asking in the sense of are there things you shouldn't make fun of, or? Sure. I mean, because yeah, there's a lot of things, I don't make jokes about rape, I don't make jokes about the Holocaust, I don't make jokes about child abuse. What you can do, or sometimes you make fun about, around those things, but the actual thing itself, nah. I mean, there's plenty of things that you can laugh about without, hurting people. Although I've found that nothing I ever write about, I can't write about anything without offending somebody, I guess is the way I should put it. You would be amazed. I mean, when I write a newspaper column, frequently nothing in it is true, and yet if it appears in the newspaper, there are people, I call them the humor impaired, who just assume that everything in there has to be true, or why would the newspaper print it? And I would always get letters like, if I'd say, Abraham Lincoln invented the light bulb, inevitably somebody would correct me on that and say, it was not Abraham Lincoln, it was Benjamin Franklin who invented, they would always get it wrong. But if you write anything for the newspaper, you have to be prepared to offend people. But I do think there's lots of areas where I would not make jokes about.
In your book, Find Happiness, is your meeting with Vice President Cheney, is that a true story?
Yeah. That was an embarrassing moment for me involving alcohol. I have several of those. But years ago, the Washington Post used to have a cartoonist dinner. And I was included. I was honored to be included. It was a small gathering of cartoonists and me and Ted Koppel. I don't know how that, but we would meet, and they would always invite some high-level Washington person to be part of the thing. And I don't think he was vice president. I think he was secretary of, wasn't he?
Secretary of Defense at the time, yeah.
And so it's a small room, and they're serving cocktails, and I may have had a couple of cocktails. And so Dick Cheney is there, and I go up to him, and I go, hi, Dick Cheney, Dave Barry, and he shakes my hand, he's very nice about it. Then I go away, and then, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, like a little bit later, we just happened to bump into each other, and I kind of half forgot that I had already introduced. I go, oh, hi, Dick Cheney, Dave Barry. And he goes, yeah, oh, yeah. But now it's striking me as funny, So I come up to him later and go, "Hi, Dick." And now I'm pretty sure he's like thinking that he has to have somebody kill me, you know? But anyway, I did do that. But this is reminding me, can I tell another story where I had too much to drink and what I did? This is not related to Dick Cheney. It actually involves Scott Turow, the author Scott Turow, who is a friend of mine and a member of a band I'm in. I'm in a band called the Rock Bottom Remainders, which is authors. And we're a terrible band, but we have a lot of fun. And one of the reasons we're bad is like other bands rehearse ahead of time. I've been told. That's their secret. Like when you see like the Rolling Stones get up there and play a song, they already know ahead of time everything they're going to play in that song, okay? Which is kind of cheating. And you think we don't do it that way. What we do is we play a song and then later on we go, we should have rehearsed that song. You know, but instead we go to a bar. And so we typically, you know, we do a show, it's almost always a fundraiser for some literacy cause, and we go to a bar. So one night, we're in a bar in New York City, and I had a few drinks. And I'm sitting next to Scott Turow, but there's a lot of other people around and everybody's talking. And Scott is telling this long, complicated anecdote involving his spleen. And I kind of like, I'm talking to other people, and I hear this story, and I'm listening for a little while. Scott is a, good speaker. He's telling the story. And I go, do you have a spleen or not? And he goes, no, I don't. That's the point of the story. That's what I'm discussing here. And I go, oh, okay. Then I go off and talk to some other, and then I'm back in a little bit, and I'm hearing something, and I'm a little confused. I go, wait, do you have a spleen or not? And he goes, no, I just told you I don't have a spleen. So, okay, and I go off to him. And then a third time I come back, and again, because of the way he's telling the story, it's not clear to me, even though and I asked him again if he has a spleen. He goes, and this could have been because I had several vodka gimlets at that point. He goes, no, and then he takes a Sharpie, and he writes, no spleen on my forearm, okay? So, okay, I have no, so now I don't have to ask him anymore because it's right here, no spleen. So anyway, the evening ends, everybody goes to bed, not together, separate, We have an early train the next morning to Boston. And I get up, alarm goes off or whatever, and I get up and I'm in the hotel room and I stagger toward the bathroom, and I look in the mirror and I see a writing on my arm. And I look down and it says, no spleen. And I have no recollection of how that got there. And you know how like there's this urban myth about the guy who wakes up in a hotel room and his kidneys have been harvested. And I'm thinking, oh my God, someone harvested my spleen. But I don't even know how to check because I don't know where my spleen is, And then my brain starts to reboot, and I realize you don't need a spleen. Like they take people's spleens out all the time. They do it for recreational purposes. They take away, like you'd have to be a moron organ harvester to harvest somebody's spleen. So the moral is here, kids, don't drink alcohol.
Well, Roxanne Friedman asked via Facebook, do you ever get up to Tallahassee? State legislatures are much crazier than D.C. How about the Panhandle?
I did. This is years ago. I did a big, long feature for this Miami Herald Sunday magazine, Tropic Magazine, about the Florida state legislature. And you're right, it's pretty funny. I was there the opening day of the legislature, and I don't know if they still do this, but their desks are covered with fruit and vegetables and flowers and chocolate. People bring them gifts, and it's the silliest looking legislative body. And then, of course, when they start passing laws, they get even sillier. But you're right. It's a rich source of humor, but I already tapped it once. Maybe I should again.
David's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hi, David. Please go ahead.
Hi. I am a middle school teacher, and I would say 99% of my students are Hispanic. And in my 33 years, I cannot think of a group of students who need to laugh more than they. And I was wondering if Mr. Barry has ever written anything on immigration, and what would be his advice to my students under the current circumstances they find themselves in the United States?
Well, if they're, or I feel, first of all, I feel for them if they're undocumented. I assume that's what you mean.
I would say the vast majority of them are dreamers, parents, but they've been through even situations where lawyers have written up documents for them, where if their parents are deported, where they would live as legal citizens in the United States. So it's been very traumatic for them, and they're middle school students, and in a middle school brain, it can be very frightening. And
all right, David and Tulsa, thank you very much.
Well, I've written. I mean, I first of all, I have nothing helpful to tell you about their situation, except that I hope that they don't get, I hope they and their parents get to stay. I've written. I happen to be fond of the middle school audience as readers. I wrote some books with Ridley Pearson for middle schoolers and some books on my own for middle schoolers. And I always find them to be, when I go to school events, a wonderful group. My favorite piece of fan mail ever from a reader was from I think they were fifth graders, two fifth grade boys who had a book club and who their book club read a book that I wrote with Ridley Pearson called Science Fair. And they wrote us a letter, which I have saved at home, that says, we think your book is one of the most awesomest books out there. Just so you know, 2 of the authors our book club have written to have died. We hope that the curse skips you, Anyway, that doesn't really help those kids in that situation.
What's a typical writing day for you?
It's so boring. I get up, I read my email, look at some websites usually, and then I call up onto the screen whatever I was last working on that I gave up on in despair and resume despairing. That, the myth about writing is that it relies on inspiration, and that just ideas just come to you and out they come out your fingers. And I think that may come to people sometimes, but those people probably are all crazy and are writing gibberish. If you're writing coherent prose, it's just so much slower than that, and so much less dependent on inspiration, and so much more dependent on willingness to just stay there in front of the screen and keep trying. And this is true, I think, of all kinds of writing. In my kind of writing, it's even more ridiculous because I'm trying to write jokes. So, I will spend 10 minutes agonizing over whether it'd be funnier to make it a weasel or a squirrel at the end of this sentence, And the answer is weasel, in case you were. But, the little things make writing work. A lot of little things, not really. I mean, usually there's one big idea behind the whole thing, but any given sentence, any given description, it's a lot of little decisions that you make that make it better, and that's just slow, painful. Again, I don't want to compare it to real work, but it's slow and painful, and it takes a long time. It's why a lot of people don't write. Most of the people I know a lot of writers, and they're not all gifted. They're just not. Some of them are plotters, but what makes them writers is that they don't quit. They keep going. They stare at that screen the day after day after, and they don't give up, even though it's pretty crappy the first time. They try to make it better and try to make it. I think most people, that's the process they go through. Probably the exception there is Stephen King, who seems to be able to write really good prose really fast, and I don't know how he does it. And also read everything ever written by anybody.
So when your books are put together, is it a light touch by the editor? Or?
It's, yeah. I mean, this is going to sound arrogant, but I generally don't believe anybody knows whether it's as good a sense of whether it's funny as I do. It's something I've done all my life. I have a lot of experience with my readers, with the audience, so I think I have a good sense for what they're going to. Now, if an editor tells me this just doesn't work, then I'll just tell him he's wrong, and I will seriously, if it's somebody I respect, I will absolutely rework it, and I'll have many, I've had discussions about individual things, but generally it's not a major reworking. You can't do that with humor, I mean, what I write is a whole series of jokes, that's what it is. There's no, and it may be, They may be almost unrelated to each other. I don't care as long as it makes you laugh. I don't care. You know, if I started out on one topic and ended up on another topic, as long as you're laughing, I'm happy. I view it as much more akin to a stand-up comedian's performance than it is to any work of literature. So the real question is, does it work? Does it make people laugh?
Do we have another question here in the audience? If we can wait for the microphone, and just give us your first name if you would.
Hi, Dave. My name is Alice, and I have a question about process, and it's an important one. How do you select the gifts in your Christmas gift guide?
There's a lot of discussion of the gift guide. Well, it takes about 10 minutes. During the course of the year, people suggest items to me, or I see something, and I send them all to my assistant, Judy Smith, and say, gift guide, gift guide. So then when it comes time to do the gift guide, she sends me this list. And I go down and go, yep, nope, yep. And it's basically, is it stupid, but is it somebody taking it seriously? If it meets those two criteria, then I'm likely to include it in the gift guide.
Thank you. That's really valuable.
Yeah. Are you planning to do a gift guide?
Our annual tradition, our annual holiday tradition, is that I read the gift guide out loud to Ray here, literally
Ray can't read?
No, he can't. And so I have tears streaming down my face, and I'm laughing hysterically, and he sits there and he rolls his eyes, and that's what we do every holiday.
I'm glad to be part of your relationship.
You are.
Well, let's hear from Layla in Henderson, Nevada. Hi, Layla.
Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Layla, please go ahead with your question or comment. We're listening.
Hi, Dave. I just wanted to let you know we have 3 generations of readers in our family. My mom reads your stuff, and my brother is now reading your old columns to his sons, and they're really enjoying them.
That generation, right down there.
Layla, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was wondering, do you miss writing for the weekly column at the Miami Herald, or do you enjoy writing your books better?
We got the question. Dave Barry.
I don't really miss writing the column. I still get to write columns sometimes when I really want to, but I don't have to every week write a column. So I have more time to do books, and since I stopped writing the column, I've been able to do young adult fiction, more fiction, which has been more interesting to me. So I don't really miss the column, no.
And we haven't talked about those books, but what are those? What are you writing?
Well, they're sequentially numbered pages with, no. What got me started was Ridley Pearson, who is the bass player in the Rock Bottom Remainders and a terrific writer. Came to Miami, this is like 12 years ago, and the Remainders were playing a gig at the Miami Book Fair. Gig is a musical term, or a thing when you play. It was like F sharp. These are musical terms. And he said that he'd been reading Peter Pan, the original Peter Pan, to his daughter. And that she asked him, well, how did Peter Pan meet Captain Hook in the first place? And really said, it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, it's like the J.M. Barrie book begins with this kid who can fly, and he never grows old, and there's, he's got Tinkerbell, and he's got Captain Hook. But none of that is explained why that happened. And he said, I thought it'd be kind of fun to write a prequel to it. And I said, yeah. I said, that sounded like a fun idea. And he said, well, do you want to do it with me? Because neither one of us had ever written anything for kids. So I said, yeah. And we thought we were going to write one short book. And we ended up writing it was almost 600-page book, and Disney published it, and it did very well. And we ended up writing 5 of those. And we traveled all over and did many events promoting the Starcatcher series, including one in this room. I have to tell you an anecdote involving this room at Books and Books. We were at that end of the room, Ridley and I, reading a... You to show you there. Yes, there is an end to the room. There it is. That's where it happened. And we were there standing against that shelf, and we were reading a section of our book, and the place was packed. There were kids, all sitting on the floor. A couple hundred kids in this room. And we were reading a scene from one of our books that involved a gigantic snake. And so Mitchell Kaplan, who owns this bookstore, knew that we were going to read that scene and didn't tell us this, but he hired a guy to bring in a snake, a snake wrangler. Like, one of the great things about living in Miami is if you need a snake, you know, a rental snake, it's like a birthday clown, but it's a snake that could, instead of entertaining the children, it could eat the children. And this guy came in, and I don't know how carefully Mitchell vetted him. But he had an 80-pound, 9 or 10-foot long Burmese python, big, heavy snake. And he came in, and it was this room full of kids, and he puts it on our shoulders, and he walked away. And he said something about how, like, he's tired of carrying it. It was heavy, you know. And it is heavy, and it starts to coil around us. Like, and Ridley and I, we did not know this was coming. And I'm not a big snake guy to begin with. And so we're like standing there trying to like, ha, ha, there's a snake, kids. And we're really thinking like, I hope we brought spare underwear to this to this reading. So anyway, that happened in this very room. That was one of the low points of writing for kids. Other than that, it's been a lot of fun.
Well, you write about the Everglades in Best State Ever, and talk about the Burmese python
invasion
population.
We have an invasion of Burmese pythons going on here in South Florida. They're not supposed to be here. They're supposed to be in Burma. That's why they're called Burmese python. But what happened was people get them as pets. And why you want a large carnivorous animal as a pet, I don't know. But they get them as pets, smaller pets, and then I guess they run out of crack. And then they go, oh my God, we're living with a carnivorous, and they let them go, and they thrive. They thrive down here, especially in the Everglades. And the estimates are that there are tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of these. They don't have any enemies out there. They even eat alligators. They'll eat everything, and they reproduce like crazy. And so the state of Florida, this is one of the great things Florida did, came up with this idea to get rid of them by means of what they call a python challenge. We're the only state in the union that has a python challenge, and it still goes on every year. The Florida State Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission brings in people to kill, invites people to come from anywhere they want to kill our pythons. And they have rules, and you have to take a short online course and pay a $25 fee. So we're not just letting anybody do this. Like if you ask anybody how you learn to handle dangerous wildlife, a short online course is the way to go. So, and I actually looked at the course, and they have rules about how you kill the python. I thought the best way to kill would be to just hack off its head. But no, you're not allowed to do that. You know why? According to Florida State Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the python, even if you hack its head off, the brain keeps thinking. They don't say what it's thinking. Probably thinking it's like, whoa, what the hell, you know? But you're supposed to kill it by putting a bolt through its brain. That will stop it from thinking. Anyway, so they do this every year. The first year, I don't know if they released figures for any subsequent year. The first year, bear in mind the figures now. We're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of these things out there. The first year, they went on for a month, and they killed 68 pythons. So do your math. Like a mom python can probably give birth to, I don't know, hundreds of eggs. And so in other words, in the same period that we got 68 of them, they probably made thousands more of them. So we're losing the python challenge, is my point. The pythons are winning. If we're going to challenge anything, we should challenge an animal we can defeat. I propose manatees. We've established we can beat them, but not pythons.
Are you a fan of the Everglades?
No, I'm not. I'm not gonna. I don't want to get rid of the Everglades because everybody says it's an important, vital ecological resource. I'm just saying it's an important, vital ecological resource that stinks and is full of mosquitoes, and I want nothing to do with it. You know. And I've always marveled at people that go out there, and isn't this incredible? I think, can you not smell it? Are you not being eaten alive by mosquitoes? So, I don't know. I'm all for it, at a distance. You know, it's like I'm for the polar ice caps too. I just don't want to be there.
Christy Beckham, tweet. Dave, I've been your biggest fan in forever. Are you still playing with Rock Bottom Remainders? Saw you play at LA Times Book Festival.
Yeah, we are still playing sometimes. We're not, as I say, we're not good. We play, Roy Blunt Jr., who's one of our members, described our genre as hard listening music. What I say is we play, I call it the rumor method of music. And the way it works is everybody in the band is holding an instrument and playing something. And then a rumor goes around that there's been a chord change. And so everybody changes to a new chord, not necessarily the same chord, not necessarily at the same time. And on we go. And then we end, sort of all random different times. But we really enjoy it. Amy Tan once said, I would do this to kill the whales. And we don't. We have not killed any whales that I know of, because the whales don't listen to us, as far as I know. But anyway, we still do play from time. We haven't played in a couple of years, but that for us is kind of a normal hiatus, because there is no demand for this band. It's not like people are going, hey, when are we going to get the Remainders together?
Well, we're going to show our audience from 1998, the Miami Book Fair. Here are the Rock Bottom Remainders.
Oh, no.
We're going to do a tragic song that Stephen King doesn't sing. We're going to do later on a tragic song Stephen does sing. Are we ready for this song? It's hard to tell with a band. We're ready. Now we're ready. We got... You know who this is, don't you? We're going to tell you who this is. Ready? One.
She really going out with him?
Well, there she is. Let's ask her.
Amy, is that Jimmy's ring you're wearing? Uh-huh. Gee, it must be great riding with him.
Is he picking you up after school?
Oh, I love him.
By the way, where'd you meet him?
I met him at the Miami bookstore. He turned around and pinched my butt. You get the picture?
Yes, we see.
That's why I fell for
the leader of the
My folks were always putting him down. Down, down. They said he came from the wrong side of town.
What do you mean when you say that he came from the wrong side of town?
They told me he was bad, but I knew he was sad.
Dave Barry, that was truly awful, listening to that band.
Yeah, I want to apologize to the audience. I don't know why, what's C-SPAN, do you have a broadcast license?
We've got all sorts of things
that's even
on
legal.
our website.
But first of all, that was Amy Tan singing Leader of the Pack, which has been a staple of the Remainders from the beginning. But we had, I didn't see, we couldn't see here who was in the band. That was the configuration changes constantly. But one night we performed that song in New York City at a benefit concert, and Amy's husband Lou DeMattei, usually plays the leader of the pack. He puts on a leather motorcycle jacket and a one of those hats, and he comes out and pretends to be riding a motorcycle. And then at the moment of the song where he crashes, the big crash, Lou would fall to the stage, and we would all be sad. It was drama, trying to take people's minds off the actual music we're making. So we're in New York, and Lou has gotten more and more dramatic with his fall, and this particular night he takes a spectacular dive to the stage. And he's like, not only does he dive to the stage, but he's writhing around as if he's in great pain. Well, I thought that was funny. So I thought, I'll add some amusement to this visual by kicking him. So I walked over and kicked Lou. And Stephen King, seeing that, thought it was pretty funny too. So he comes over, so the two of us are kicking Lou as he's lying on the stage. And then the song finishes, Lou crawls off the stage, and we finish the concert, and we go backstage, and we went, "Where's Lou?" And he goes, "He's in the hospital." Turns out when he dove to the stage, he broke his collarbone. And we were kicking him while he's lying there in pain. So anyway, that's kind of fun band we are.
Well, we also showed viewers some of your favorite books and influences, and I wanted to ask about this book by Patrick O'Brien.
Oh yeah,
Master and Commander.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I like sort of semi-historical books, which doesn't probably seem like the kind of book I would like, but this Patrick O'Brien wrote this series of books, which have developed a cult following. It was made into one movie with Russell Crowe, I think, playing the main character. But they're just an amazing books where the guy talks in incredible detail about sailing ships in the 18th and 17th, 18th centuries, I think. And for some reason, it's just riveting because the guy is such a good writer. He wrote, I think, 10 or 12 of them. And I ended up reading all of them and loving them, wishing he'd written more.
You're a Bill Bryson fan?
I am a Bill Bryson fan. I like Bill Bryson a lot. I've never met him, but I think I've read every book he's ever written. And he's really funny, and this is something I could never do, he's also really informative. Like I always think when people read my books, they end up being a little stupider. I mean, they may have enjoyed themselves, but they didn't learn anything. Whereas with Bill Bryson, he's funny and you learn a lot of things. Now, I forget them all pretty quickly, but I remember for a little while thinking, for this brief period of time, I sort of understand molecules or whatever it is he's talking about.
You won the Pulitzer in 1988. Have you won one since?
No. Have you won any since? Yeah, I did. I won a Pulitzer Prize. Can I tell you my Pulitzer Prize story? Because people always say, well, what's that like? And first of all, it was completely a shock to me. This is not false modesty. I didn't expect it. I didn't even think I was a finalist for it. I was only dimly aware I'd even been nominated, but I did. I won a Pulitzer Prize. And it was nice because it happened early enough in my career that I never had to think about it again. It happened unexpectedly, and then it was over. I won it. But the day I won it, the Miami Herald actually won 2 Pulitzers that day. A photographer named Michael Lucille also won one. And in the newsroom, it's a big deal, Pulitzer Day. And they wanted it to be a surprise. They were notified earlier in the day that I had won and Michael had won, but they didn't tell either of us that. But they wanted us to come in for the moment, so it would be a surprise for us. And I, that day, had been planning, it was a Friday, I believe, had been planning to go to Key West. And I told my son, Rob, who was then 7 years old, we're going to Key West. And he was very excited. He loved to go to Key West because we always rented a motor scooter, and he would ride on the back, and we could ride all around Key West. So he loved to go to Key West. He was very excited. We're going to go to Key West. Then I get a call from Gene Weingarten, my editor at the Herald, saying, you have to come in for a meeting. And I go, I can't, I'm going to Key West, sorry. He goes, nope. You know, Janet Chesmer, she's the editor, said you have to be at this meeting, it's an important meeting. And I go, So, okay, I told Rob, we're going to go to Key West, but first we have to go to the Herald, go to downtown. So we get there, and the newsroom is all gathered around the AP machine for the big announcement. And I remember saying to Rob, hey, this is cool, you're going to see, they're announcing Pulitzers today. I still didn't know it was me, but I thought it was kind of cool he was going to see this moment. And I figured that's why I'd been called in, they wanted everybody in there for it. And then about, 30 seconds before the announcement, an editor who didn't know it was supposed to be a surprise came up to me and shook my hand and said, congratulations. And I suddenly realized two things. One is that I was going to win a Pulitzer Prize. Two, that we weren't going to be able to go to Key West because, there's a whole lot of, stuff you got to do. And so I looked down to Rob, who's standing there, and I said, Rob, I got bad news. We're not going to Key West this weekend. And his face just fell, and I said, but I will get you a Nintendo, because he'd been dying to get this Nintendo game, and I've been saying, not until your birthday. I was being a good dad, And he goes, really? And I go, yes. And he jumped up, and he put his arms around me and hugged me really tight because of the Nintendo. And at that moment, Janet Chesmer read that I had just won a Pulitzer Prize, and they took my picture. So the next day, the cover of the Miami Herald, the front page of the Herald was Herald wins 2 Pulitzers, and one of the pictures of me with Rob with his arms around his neck and this huge smile on his face. And everybody said the same thing to me, which is, it's so great that your son was so excited he won a Pulitzer Prize. When the truth is, he had no idea about the Pulitzer Prize. He was happy about the Nintendo. So anyway, but fast forward till a couple of years ago, my son Rob, who's now a grown man and has a kid of his own, is a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and he was on a team of reporters that did a story on Medicare fraud that won a Pulitzer Prize. So, see that? I didn't destroy him completely.
Back to your calls for Dave Barry, and this is Sue in Gatesville, Texas. Sue, good afternoon to you. Please go ahead. We are listening.
Good afternoon. Hey, Dave. I've been a fan for a very long time. You know me on the blog as Susie Q. Wackvet. I have a couple of questions about your new book. You have a new book coming out on Tuesday, I think, called For This We Left Egypt, a Passover Haggadah for Jews and Those Who Love Them. First, my question is, how do you 3 guys get together and write a book like this? And then my second question is, I'm not Jewish. What's in this book for me?
Okay. First of all, you're correct. I co-wrote a book, I don't know how many of our audience know what Haggadah is, but on Passover, Jews hold seders, which are these dinners in which they commemorate the escape of the Jewish people from Egypt. And it's a ritualized meal with various things symbolizing elements of the Exodus. Anyway, this is usually accompanied by this book called the Haggadah, which people of the Jewish faith are very familiar with. It kind of leads you through. There's prayers. There's discussions of why you eat this and why you eat that. So a guy named Adam Mansbach, who's a author, among other things, who wrote a book whose title I cannot reveal on even C-SPAN, I don't think, but it's Go the F to Sleep. Huge best-selling book. And he and Alan Zweibel, a friend of mine who I also wrote a book with once called Lunatics, and it was Adam's idea, co-wrote a parody of a Haggadah. And just so you know, I am also not Jewish. My wife is Jewish. She's Cuban Jewish. Juban. There's a lot of them here in Miami. My joke is they didn't come on rafts. They parted the Caribbean. But because my wife is Jewish, I am very familiar with seders. I've been to many. We host them at our house. I actually belong to a temple, even though I'm not Jewish, down here. So I was roped into this project, which was actually a lot of fun. And your question is like, what's in it for you? I don't know, but royalties are in it for me. So by all means, Susie, you should buy it.
202 is the area code if you want to participate in our conversation from Miami this afternoon, 748-8200. For those of you in the East and Central time zones, 748-8201. For those of you in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. And do we have any questions from the audience? Wait for the mic, and let's bring the mic up here. And we've got one here in the front row.
Hi, Dave. I'm George. I just had a couple comments. As a resident of Florida, 20 years more than you, I can definitively say that we were completely sane until you showed up.
It was my fault. All right, I'll accept that.
And now back to the holiday situation. My sister was at the Coral Gables Congregational when you did a thing there, and she won an electric finger that shaves the hair.
Yeah, an electric nose clipper shaped like a finger.
And she re-gifted it, and she gave me the finger. She gave me the finger for Christmas, and I'm blaming you for that.
That's right. Well, I'm glad to help.
Well, let's go back to our calls then. Let's hear from Lori up in Herndon, Virginia. Hi, Lori.
Oh, hi. How are you?
We're good. Go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
Yes. When you decide you want to write a book and you purge everything out, where should you send your book to get reviewed and appreciated?
So just to clarify, you wrote a book?
No, I am working on one now. I'm a widow. I have two 20-year-olds and things like that. I can't hear you because they told me to turn the TV down, so I'm not really sure what you're saying to me right now.
Yeah, you'll be able to hear through your telephone. Now, Dave Barry is going to talk, so if you could just hang on, and we'll listen to him.
Well, if I gather, the question is, how do you go about getting a book published, and then how do you get it reviewed, and how do you get it distributed? There are basically two ways to go, and I hope I don't offend anybody when I say the way not to go is to self-publish. I say that because it's easy to do. Many people do it. You pay money, and they publish your book. The problem with that is it's almost impossible to get a self-published book distributed anywhere, reviewed anywhere, looked at anywhere. There's just so many of them out there, and there's basically no quality control. I'm not saying that they're bad. There's probably been some wonderful self-published books. I'm just saying the way the industry is set up, for better or for worse, people don't review them, bookstores don't stock them, so you're going to end up with a stack of books in your garage. You can maybe sell them to your friends, but that's about as far as it will go. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Maybe I'm behind the times. Maybe there's some internet way, and I assume there is, to get your books known. And if there is, I retract everything I just said. I'm just saying from what my experience is. So the traditional way to go, and there are a lot of flaws in it, and people are very critical of it, is to get an agent. And agents are kind of like the gatekeepers. They'll most of the time tell you they're not going to take you on, and if they are, they might tell you to rewrite your book and whatever. But they then theoretically get it to a publisher, and that's the second gatekeeper. An editor there will either decide to publish it or not publish it. The advantage of that is if they do decide to publish it, this is an organization that has a sales staff. It has promotional people. They can get your book distributed. They can get your book reviewed. Maybe at least can do a more professional job than most writers are able to do for themselves. That said, I know there are people who, particularly in science fiction and fantasy and stuff, who are able to reach huge audiences some way I don't know about, and get a huge amount of cult interest in a book that maybe is self-published. I should stress that. But the way I've described it is the traditional way. Maybe that it's more difficult and less likely. But
do you still write every day?
Yeah, I write every day. Well, maybe a couple days I won't, but yeah, almost every day of the week I'll write something.
Is Wikipedia valuable to you?
Yes, it is. Although I've learned just from reading my own Wikipedia entry that it's highly inaccurate. So, but I will use it to, like find out if somebody's still alive or not. Like for example, I'm dead in Wikipedia. No, no. But yeah, I use it just because it's cheap and easy and fast, and it's general. But I have learned that if you want to really nail down a fact, you should confirm it with some other source besides Wikipedia, because you never know. You never know.
What's inaccurate about the entry on you? And did you have any input into that?
No, I've never. There are people I know who are always trying to fix things. Well, it's more like the emphasis. The last time I looked at Wikipedia, it made two huge points about me. One is that I'm a libertarian, and one that I'm an atheist. These are both true, but I don't write about libertarianism, and I don't write about atheism. I don't really write about politics that much directly. I don't advocate anything. And I never write about religion, really, except just generic jokes. But obviously somebody who thought that was great kind of made that, and if you were to read at least what I read, it made it sound like that what I am is a libertarian atheist writer. Okay. You could argue I am, but that's not what I do. That's not who I think of myself as. And I don't think most people reading me would ever know that or care about it.
So your father was a minister.
I'm an atheist.
And you belong to a temple here in Miami? And you're an atheist?
I am, yeah. I was early on. My dad was a wonderful guy. He was the least he was not a what's the word? It's not the word that I'm looking for. Well, not that at all. I mean, he wasn't like rigid, and he had friends of all different faiths, and the important thing for him is, were you good or bad, not, what church you went to. But I remember he and I had long, passionate arguments where I would try to get him to, to order me to be religious, and he wouldn't, and I said, I'm just not buying this. He goes, it's okay, you don't have to. I do, you don't have to. So he was pretty easygoing about it. But yeah, my dad was a Presbyterian minister. I'm an atheist, and I belong to a Jewish temple. And I just co-wrote a Haggadah. So I'm probably going to hell. I think that's a safe bet. Fortunately. And boy, will I be surprised. I'll be like, whoa, I was so wrong about this.
How are you
My bad, I'll be saying to the devil.
How are you a libertarian?
Well, I don't want to get all philosophical about it. I learned when I was a newspaper reporter, when I started out at the newspaper business, my assumption had always been that people who go into government because they want to help people. And kind of immediately when I started meeting political people, I found they're very often delightful, likable people, and some of them very good people. But generally, I found that politics and government was really no different from any company. That is to say, most of the people in it were in it for some kind of personal reason, either power or money or both or whatever. And at each next level up, heading toward federal government and the presidency, I found it to be more and more the case. If you're really involved in Washington politics, my guess is you're not really involved in Washington politics because you want me to have a happier life. It's because you want something, And so over the years, I just came to the conclusion, I really would rather have me make decisions about my life and you make decisions about your life than have somebody in Washington pretending to care about me making decisions about my life. So that's generally the position I take. Now, I'm not like a hardcore libertarian. I'm okay with some laws. Like I live in Coral Gables where we have zoning laws where it's basically illegal to do anything here except breathe. And I'm okay with that, because but I'm not really okay with that. But I'm not like an in-your-face libertarian guy, but my philosophy is generally, if I have to choose between more government involvement and less government involvement in almost any human activity, I favor less. Which means I'm also not very big on drug laws, not very big on, laws against who can marry whom, that kind of thing.
Have you ever met any U.S. presidents?
Yeah. I met both George Bushes. I met Bill Clinton. I never met Barack Obama. I've been in the room with him, but I haven't actually met him. Abraham Lincoln. I was just a kid. But
on what occasions did you meet these?
Well, okay, George Bush, the senior. God, this is a lot. How much time do we have? I was at a. Well, I have to start with the previous anecdote. I was writing columns about the New Hampshire primary in 1992. So I was on the campaign trail, and Barbara Bush was going around, and I thought, for a column, I would spend the day in a press entourage with Mrs. Bush. So I did. We were going all around New Hampshire in a motorcade, and at the end of the day, there was a big event, and we ended up with Mrs. Bush and the press corps that had been with her on the stage getting our picture taken together. And I said to her, it was the most embarrassing thing. She didn't know me, I didn't know her. I said to her, just kind of blurted out, I shop at the same supermarket as your son Jeb. And she's like, well, who gives a shit, and then I said, I'm really embarrassed I said that, and I goes, he's very tall. He's like one of those things where you just wish you would just shut up, and she goes like, well, he didn't just grow this year, It was like awkward moment, and I'll never forget. I was like, then like a few months later, I was in Washington D.C. at the correspondence dinner where I spoke. This is like, and he was the president, and there's a little room off stage where all the people on the dais all gather, and he was there, and I remember going, and I still have this vivid memory in my mind of embarrassing myself in front of his wife, Mrs. Bush, and it's like I'm telling myself, I'm not kidding. I'm saying to myself, don't be an idiot, don't be an idiot, don't be an idiot, because I was in a line to go up to meet him. So I go up, shake his hand, and I go, I shop at the same supermarket. I like blurted it out, and he goes, he was really interested. It was he was a much different reaction from his wife. So that's how I met him. And I met his son before he became president. Mrs. Bush has a literacy charity, really wonderful charity, and they have a big banquet every year in Houston, big fundraiser. And I was invited down, and this is after, of course, the senior Bush was no longer president. Well, my wife and I went to his house for lunch, and I ended up sitting next to him that evening at the dinner, so met him that way. Bill Clinton, I met him before he became president, but I will never forget what he did, and this is why he became president, really. Not because of me, but it was in New Hampshire, again, 92. And he's running for president, and it's the night before the election, night before the primary vote, and I'm with a bunch of columnists and reporters, and we all have been, drenched in this campaign. We're sick of it, and we've all written our story for the next day or a column for the next day. We're like, we're going to go somewhere there's no chance we're going to see a candidate or anybody involved in politics. It's just going to be just us. We're going to go, So we go to this Italian restaurant, kind of in outskirts of Manchester, New Hampshire, and there's nobody there but us. It's getting late. We're going to be the last party there. We're sitting around this table. The door opens, and in walks Bill Clinton, Dee Dee Myers, and I forgot her name. Gwen Eiffel, who was then with the New York Times. And Dee Dee Myers was his press secretary, and him. He's still campaigning. It's like the night before. He comes in, just bustling with energy. It's like, and he waves at us, goes into the kitchen, and you can see him going around, shaking hands with everybody in the kitchen, comes out, shakes it, all wait staff. Then he comes over to our table, goes around the table, and he knew who every single person at the table was, including me. He knew who I was. He's like, I don't know. And then he walks out off into the night to find more people to charm. And he had totally charmed us. We're like, wow, he knew what we were, and he came over. So that was my Bill Clinton. And then a couple of times when he was in the White House, I was at some event where he was just shaking hands with everybody, and I shook his hand. But that was really, that was like Michael Jordan level politician. That's a skill that very few people have that he had.
Next call for Dave Barry comes from Gay in Adamstown, Maryland. Gay, go ahead, we're listening.
Hi, Dave. I am a big fan of yours, and I just wanted to say that I so appreciate your ironic sense of humor. And since you live in Florida, that must give you lots of fodder for your books. And I wondered if maybe you could relay a story that I read in one of your books from, it was a while ago, but I think it was titled Pavlov's Dog, and it was about your dogs and your porch, or the absence of. Could you please?
Yes. Okay, well, this is Hurricane Andrew, 1992, which was the worst hurricane that I've been through down here. It went over, pretty much directly over my house. At the time, I had two dogs. I had a large Maine dog named Ernest and a small emergency backup dog named Zippy. And before Hurricane Andrew came, I let Ernest and Zippy out every morning via a two-stage procedure. And as you know, if you are a dog owner, dogs get very excited about going out in the morning, and they learn whatever the ritual is associated with it. Very excited, like, oh my God, I'm going to go out. Even though you do it every day, the dog gets excited every day. So with Ernest and Zippy, I would open the back door to our house, and then we had a patio with a screen enclosure, which you need down here to keep the mosquitoes from stealing your patio furniture. And so they would run across the patio to the screen door and wait for me there. And I would go over to the screen door and open the door, and they would go out into the yard. So we did that every day for years. Back door, screen door, yard. So anyway, comes Hurricane Andrew, and the screen enclosure is orbiting the Earth, okay? It's gone. But the screen door was still there. Just a door on the end of the porch with nothing around it at all. It was like a 2-week learning curve. I'm not making this up. I would open the back door, and they would run straight to the screen door and wait, because that was the procedure. And I would like get it open. They could go out in the yard. So, yeah. So I wrote so many columns about Ernest and Zippy, and they basically all boil down to, these are not rocket scientists, these dogs. The other thing, I used to work, I wrote about them a lot because I worked with them a lot. They were like always in my office, and you know, and typically, I don't know why, I work with the door closed, and the door would be closed, and Ernest would be on one side, off on the inside, and Zippy would be on the other side, outside. They would just basically lie there all day long. So over and over, this would happen. I think there's a satellite, I call it the dog satellite, that passes overhead and emits sounds that only dogs can hear. Because if you had a dog, like, they'll be just lying, there's nothing going on in your house, nothing going on in your neighborhood, nothing going on anywhere, and suddenly one of the dogs will go, woof, you know. So we'd be sitting there, and, I mean, I'd be tapping away on my keyboard, and suddenly one of them would jump up on inside the door and go, woof. And of course the other one would hear that on the other side of the door and figure, well, something's going on, you know, and go, woof. And then the first one would hear that, woof. And now they're barking furiously, each trying to get to the other side of the door to see what's going on. So I'd have to get up and open the door. They would switch places, close the door, they go back to sleep, and we go back to work. So that's Ernest and Zippy. They're gone now, but I still have a dog. In fact, my current book that I'm writing is about dogs, and I have a dog named Lucy, who's a little smarter than Ernest and Zippy, but
a dog about books.
A dog
book about dogs.
Not really a dog about books. She's more a dog about smells. But yeah, no, it's a book about dogs. Yeah.
When will it be coming out?
Well, I have to write it first, but thanks. Yeah. No, I'm just getting started on it. So.
Next call for Dave Barry comes from Buck in Roaring River, North Carolina. Buck, please go ahead.
Buck.
Hey, Dave. I met you in Miramar at Zeta-4. When you were doing the interview there, and I just remember that you dressed all in black, drove a black car, and I got your autograph, and, you know, that was right off of University Drive where, you know, once in a while I'd pull a 200-pound turtle out of the middle of the street or an alligator or snakes, and, you know, I was there for the Cocaine Cowboys and read your article every week. And I just wanted to say that my favorite bumper sticker on my car was, "Will the last American leaving Miami please bring the flag?" Do you have any comments on that?
Well, those days are long past. Not really. The 200-pound turtle gets my attention, though. It's in the street, you say. Yeah, we do have that occasional, gigantic, shouldn't be there reptile walking around, but the reptile's position is, no, you shouldn't be here. This is a swamp. I belong here.
Well, you write about Dave Shealy, and you say that he's a member of a tough but dwindling breed of Floridians known as Gladesmen, guys who have spent their lives roaming the swamp. Is old Florida disappearing in that sense?
Yeah, it is. My book about Florida, Best State Ever, starts with an essay about Dave Shealy, who runs the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters out in Ochopee, in the middle of the Everglades. So it's just like a dot. People just zip by on Route 41. But it's the skunk ape, which is what is a legendary beast, kind of like Sasquatch, that theoretically roams the Everglades and nobody ever gets a clear picture of, even though everybody's got a phone. But he has the skunk ape research headquarters out there, and I went out to do a story about it. And my goal when I went out there was to kind of make fun of it, because I don't believe there is a skunk ape. I think it's just kind of fun. And but when I got out there and got to hang around with this guy Dave Shealy for a while, I was kind of moved by he is like, this is a group of people who lived out there since probably 50 years ago. They had a community. It really was a real little community. They lived, they roamed the Everglades and everything. And now it's basically the federal government is taking over and wants them off the land. It's willing to let the Native American, the Miccosukee, stay, but not the Anglos. They got to go. But that's a real part of Florida, and they're just being told you don't belong here, you can't be here anymore, which I think is kind of a shame. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of the book, which is, I tried to be funny in the book, and I hope the book is funny, but there is an element of the Florida that a lot of people grew up with down here is disappearing. Typically now, when people come to Florida, many people, they go either to a resort on a beach, or they go to Orlando and they go to a theme park. And they don't see much else of Florida. There used to be the Florida that, when I was a kid, when we drove down in the 50s, was a completely different Florida. There was no interstate. There were no big theme parks. There were a million little roadside attractions that were cheesy. They were a lot like the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters, to be honest. But that was a real part of Florida. And people would be driving, a couple hours, and they'd see a sign, the world's largest snail or something, and they'd pull off and be something to look at, something to do. Florida, that was a big industry down here. Now it's mostly gone. I went to one of the places, Weeki Wachee, which is really a wonderful place.
Has anyone here in the audience been to Weeki Wachee? There's one. Two.
It's owned, believe it or not, the state of Florida now owns it. So we are, with our tax dollars, paying for mermaids, which is, I'd rather pay for mermaids than our current governor, to be honest. But it's people, they breathe out of hoses. They're women wearing rubber tails, come swimming up out of this natural spring and put on a show. It's the same show they've been putting on for 50 years. It used to be a big deal. Arthur Godfrey used to broadcast from there, and now it's it's kind of dying. And if it weren't for the state of Florida, it would be gone altogether. Then I went to a place called it's called Sponge-O-Rama in Tarpon Springs, Florida, which is devoted to the sponge trade, and it hasn't changed in 50 years, whatever. But those places aren't going to last. It's going to all be basically the Magic Kingdom and resorts, and I guess that's the way it's going to be. But we are losing Florida was always a different state, and that was one of the things that made it really different, was all those roadside attractions. They're mostly gone now.
Let's hear from Jerry in Astoria, New York. Hi, Jerry.
Hi. I'd like to thank Dave for many years of great fun reading his books, and I wanted to ask him about, Dave, what do you think, you mentioned having won a Pulitzer many years ago, and I know just a year or two ago, Lin-Manuel Miranda won a Pulitzer for his work creating Hamilton on Broadway. And I wondered what you thought about the Hamilton phenomenon. To me, it seems great because I used to teach, and kids are actually expressing an interest in history and learning through the use of their own music and culture that they have nowadays. I also thought it was great because minorities are promoted in this. And I wondered what you thought, number one, of Hamilton, if you've seen it, or if you've at least heard some of the music from it. I'm not a fan of rap, but I do like Hamilton. And I wondered what you thought about the fact that they have a cast that's made up of all different minorities of people. I mean, just what do you think about this whole thing?
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Dave Barry on this.
My answer is going to be disappointing. I have not seen Hamilton, but everybody I know has seen Hamilton. I think I'm the last person in the United States, and I would love to see it. Everybody says it's incredible. And I think it's just kind of wonderful, the idea. If you would have told people, I don't know, 10 years ago, that the biggest play, the biggest show on Broadway is going to be a rap musical about Alexander Hamilton, people would assume you were taking drugs. And in my case, they would be right. But no. But I think that's fantastic. And I agree with you that it's great if it gets kids interested in history. But yeah, I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
You and I are the
only two, yeah. I understand, like, it's really hard to get tickets and they're really expensive, so.
Yeah. Any questions here in the audience? We've got somebody back here. And we are at Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida. Please go ahead, tell us your first name.
My name is Scott. It's interesting you mentioned religion earlier because I went to college at Florida State, and the Tallahassee Democrat, the local paper, carried your column every Sunday. And as a very poor college student, I would splurge on a Sunday paper every week just to read your column.
Oh, thank you.
And I remember one column in particular, you kind of poked fun at basketball players who do the sign of the cross before free throws. And you kind of poked fun at them a little bit, and I thought it was hilarious. And my boss, who I worked at a part-time job at the time, had never heard of you. So I showed him that column. He was a very religious man, and he was mortified. and I'm sorry that I blew a potential fan in him. But my question is, what would you consider your most controversial column, or got the most feedback from?
Well, first of all, we actually discussed that earlier because there was a column about religion, and I was contrasting people. You know, I said everybody's religion seems stupid to somebody else. I said, like, for example, we don't think anything of the fact that people make a cross before they take a foul shot as if God cares about. And meanwhile, over in India, we're mocking this guy who says that you should drink your own urine, you know, and I'm saying the urine drinker's like, they make the cross before. And anyway, so that did come up. And I'm sorry I offended your boss, but he sounds like an idiot, to be honest. No, I'm sure he's a great guy. The most controversial. Man, there's been a few, but I would say the one that got the most mail of anything I ever wrote, pro and con, started when and this was not even the point of the column, when I suggested, and I'm going to say this, before I say it, I just want to stress, I no longer think this. I said that maybe Neil Diamond was not the best lyricist who ever lived. And specifically writing about the song where he sings with great intensity and passion in his voice. I said to no one there, and no one heard it all, not even the chair. You know, I'm think, really, no kidding, Neil. Probably the table didn't react either because these are furniture. So anyway, but that wasn't the point of the column at all. I was just like this. I never liked that song because of that lyric, and it makes me want to change the channel. So that column ran, and that was just a trivial part of it, and it just infuriated the Neil Diamond people. You think Salman Rushdie got in trouble? I mean, it was like, I got all this mail from people saying, like, how dare you criticize this genius Neil Diamond? You know, I listened to Heartlight 14 times and it cured my goiter, Mr. Barry. You know, it's like passionate defense of Neil Diamond. So I thought that was great. I mean, this is like when you're writing a column, when somebody hands you something to write about. So I wrote another column about specifically the Neil Diamond people. and how they had really been offended, and and I quoted a bunch of their letters and everything. And that set off a new round. That column ran and set off a new round of letters from people who agreed with me and were, wanted to back me up on that Neil Diamond lyric, and also wanted to talk about other songs they hated. And so I started, I wrote another column about all songs people don't want to ever hear again on the radio. And then that just opened the floodgates. And for the next, few weeks, I received over 10,000 letters. This is back in the days of letters. Over 10,000 letters on the question of songs people hate. And I ended up writing a book called The Book of Bad Songs, which was, and it's still, to this day, people will come up to me and go, you know that song about the horse with no name? I hate that song, The late comedian, Rich Cheney, had the great lines of like, you're in the desert, you got nothing to do, name the freaking horse, Anyway, that would probably, there have been others, but that one really set him off. I also once wrote a column in which I made fun of North Dakota, which was a huge mistake. If you don't learn anything else, don't mess with North Dakota, because they invited me up there in January and dedicated a sewage lifting station in my honor. If you go to Grand Forks, North Dakota, for any reason, such as your plane has crashed there, there is a lift station on it in foot-high letters. Says Dave Barry Lift Station number 16. It's a little bit of a tourist attraction, I have to say. So that one got a lot. But
did you go to the dedication?
I did. I went to the dedication.
Why did they name it after you?
Because, well, they were being funny. I had made fun of North Dakota, and they were getting even with me, and it was the coldest I've ever been, and it was like way below zero. And they had put a piece of brown paper over the sign on the side of this building. The mayor of Grand Forks, an actual crowd showed up and some news media, and we're all standing there freezing in front of this building. And the mayor of Grand Forks reads this proclamation comparing my work to the production of human excrement. And at the big moment, they had me tear the piece of paper off, and I remember standing there and seeing my name on the side of this building and smelling the sewage in the cold North Dakota air and hearing whoop, 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 which is the sound of people applauding in mittens. So that was pretty big.
Well, Susan on Facebook asks, I recently finished Dave's book. Were there any places in Florida that you wanted to visit and write about, but for some reason, logistics, time, etc., could not get to or include?
Yeah, I didn't get to half of Florida. I didn't get to a tenth of Florida. There are lots and lots of places. None is immediately coming to mind, but I had a list of things that I want to do. I never got to the Florida Panhandle. Never got to North Florida. I could maybe do another book because I enjoyed it. I mean, I really enjoyed going to places and writing about them. Usually, I'm sitting at home making things up. So it's fun to go to see a place, take notes, and then make things up about it. No, they actually have something to write about.
Can you go incognito?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not famous. I have the kind of fame where somebody might occasionally recognize me in the cereal aisle of Publix, but not the kind of fame where I get mobbed. So, yeah, I didn't ever attempt to hide who I was. When I went to a place called the Villages, which is this amazing, just amazing community in north central Florida. A couple 100,000 retirees drinking and dancing and playing golf and just partying and having a good time. And I got recognized a few times there. But
next call for Dave Barry comes from Isabel in Middleton, Wisconsin. Hi, Isabel.
Hi. Hello?
Please go ahead, we're listening.
Okay, I have a question for Dave. You haven't picked on gray-haired old ladies in retirement homes yet. You've missed a huge, great place to pick up laughs.
Well, I actually kind of did a little bit in this section we were just talking about it at the Villages, but I haven't really done retirement home humor, and that's probably because I am personally very close to being in a retirement home. And I don't want to have anybody be too offended. I have I have a story about a retirement home guy. My wife's grandfather, he's passed away, but his name was Henry Kaufman. And when he was in his 90s, 90s because he's old, But he was born in Poland, then he moved to Cuba, was there for a while, came to the United States, spoke many different languages, wonderful guy. But he was in a retirement home. And my wife and I used to go visit him regularly. And Henry always wore a jacket and tie, gentlemen of that age tended to. And he would sit at the same table with 3 other gentlemen also wearing jackets and ties at mealtime. And we would come visit them. And Henry would always do the same thing. We'd come up and he would recognize his granddaughter, my wife, Michelle. And he always wanted to introduce us to the others. Like, this is my granddaughter, and this is my grandson-in-law. He is a very famous writer. His name is, what is your name again? I never remember who I was. And I was like, Dave Barry. Dave Barry, yes. And the other thing is, always wanted to, he knew I wrote, but he never read anything I wrote. And he always wanted to know how my books were, he was like in the clothing business. He wanted to know how his sales were doing. And I always had this picture that he thought I kind of went door to door, I'm like, anyway, Henry, the retirement home, that might be good for humor. And the ideal would be that they would forget everything I said. But are we even allowed to make that joke? Probably not anymore.
Poetry Matters Project tweets into you. Dave Barry, I thought the worst class trip ever was hilarious. What was that, first of all? And then she goes on, or Lucinda goes on to say, what made you write a kid's book?
The worst class trip ever is one of 2 books I've written with the worst. The other one's called The Worst Night Ever. They're both middle school books that I wrote on my own for Disney. And the worst class trip ever, what inspired me to write it was when my daughter was in middle school, she went on a class trip and they had parent chaperones, and I was one of the chaperones. And I remember thinking, there's something wrong with an institution that lets me be responsible for these children. Things could be really bad, with an idiot like me in a position of responsibility. So I came up with a plot where this kid goes to Washington, D.C. on his class trip. And as we say in the comedy biz, hijinks ensue. Lots of things happen, but it was a fun book to write, and it actually, kids seem to like it. So.
And if we have another question from the audience here, there's a gentleman back here. Go ahead, sir.
It's not really a question, but your book Guide to Guys is my favorite book, and it's the funniest book I've ever read in my life.
Well, thank you.
And there's one I just want to talk about one thing in there. There's one section there where these 4 guys got really, really drunk, and they lived near a ski slope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they decided to go down the ski slope in a canoe.
Yes. No, they go off a ski jump.
A ski jump. They went up
Not
a ski
just
jump.
going down a slope is one thing.
Yeah.
Going off a ski jump.
They went up a ski jump.
No, it wasn't in Florida. We don't have snow in Florida. You've done no research.
They go off the ski jump, and the police afterwards were investigating the accident, obviously, and they came across an oar.
Yeah. Where do they come across it? The things that only guys do. I've written many columns about things guys do. Like, in the history of the world, no woman has ever thought, I want to go off a ski jump in a canoe. Whereas guys have, you could easily, without any effort, find dozens of guys would be willing to do that. The other one I always say, the ultimate test between men and women is go to YouTube and Google the phrase, shoot bottle rocket out of ass. Can I say ass on? Butt. Shoot bottle rocket out of butt. But anyway, you will find dozens, if not hundreds, of videos of that very thing. It goes without saying, none of these are women. Oh, no woman ever would think to do that. Many, many guys have thought to do that. I have to say, they're young guys. Older guys don't, I don't think, but,
Rich is in Middleburg, Florida. Rich, you're on with author and humorist Dave Barry. This is Book TV on C-SPAN 2, and we are listening.
Hi, Dave. Nice to talk to you again. Just 2 quick questions. One was, is there ever going to be a movie version of Lunatics? It's one of my all-time favorite novels, humorous novels, right up there with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And 2, talk of collaborations. Have you ever thought about collaborating with Stephen King for a comedy horror novel?
Well, as to the first, no, I don't think there ever will be a movie of lunatics. We did sell the script, but that doesn't mean anything in the world of Hollywood, where they buy scripts all the time for movies they don't intend to make. But Alan Zweibel did. We wrote a screenplay for it, and they bought it, but that's as far as that went. Although it was a lot of fun to write that book. I would love to write a book with Stephen King, or just have my name on a book with Stephen King. He can write it. But I don't think Stephen is looking, I don't think he needs any help from me. Let me put it that way.
Now, if
I've thought about calling some of my books, the something by Stephen King, but apparently there's a legal issue with that.
Not to give away a secret, but you emailed him right before the show.
Yeah, Stephen and I are, Stephen is part of the Rock Bottom Remainers, the band that plays sometimes. And there's here at this very bookstore, in the men's room, right next to the urinal, is a poster of the Rock Bottom Remainers in 1993 when we came to Miami for the American Booksellers Association convention here. So I thought it was funny. I took a picture of it showing, the urinal and the poster of our band, and I sent it to a bunch of members of the band, and Stephen wrote back that it was, from a critical standpoint, the most appropriate place to put that particular, yeah.
Another one of your favorite books, The Killer Angels by Michael Shera.
Yeah, as I say, I love kind of historical fiction. Again, because it's just so different from what I do. It's like a real release for me. And this is a book about the Battle of Gettysburg. And it set me, I read it in the 70s, I think, not long after it was published. And it's I don't know. It's one of the best written books I've ever read on anything. And it made me just so fascinated with Gettysburg that this, while I was reading it, I started planning a trip. And as soon as I finished, I drove to Gettysburg and spent a couple of days there just walking around all the places it talks about in that book. And I've always had, ever since that, this vibe about Gettysburg. I like to go there. I like to hang around there. It's one of the kind of eeriest, most spiritually moving places in the United States, if not the world, because of what happened there and because of how thoroughly documented it was. So I just love that book. And I ended up reading a whole bunch of historical fiction because of that book.
Is there a serious book in you?
No. I've written a few serious columns in my life, usually when something really bad happened. When my dad died, I wrote a column about that. When my mom committed suicide, I wrote a column about that. When my son was hit by a car, and I wrote about, that was like really tough. But that was one of the few times where I thought, I have a point to make, which is that he didn't have a helmet on. And not to get too melodramatic, but the same night that I was in the hospital with him, 2 other kids came in and they didn't make it. And all 3 kids were boys who had been riding bikes, got hit by cars and weren't wearing helmets. My son was the only one who lived. So, I wrote about that. And people liked those columns. And some people said, I heard more than once, especially with the one about my mom, why don't you write more serious columns? I really like that. I thought, because the only reason I write those columns is because there's something horrible that happened that I needed to deal with, to process by writing about it. I don't want more things like that to happen to me. So I'm not going to make stuff up that's horrible. I'd rather not dwell on the bad things. So.
Next call for Mr. Barry is Susie in Kalispell, Montana. Susie, good afternoon from sunny Miami.
Dave, your former next-door neighbor in Gables by the Sea, owner of aircraft carrier Bear.
My dog were like, well, it was not for children to watch. How you doing? How's Paul?
He went to meet his maker 10 years ago.
Sorry, Susie. It's it's casual of me to just toss that out there. Well, you sound like you're still alive, and that's important.
Yes, I'm 80 last month, and the boys were all here to celebrate with me.
Now, Susie, what was it like living next door to Dave Barry? If you could share a story with us.
I could, many, but I won't. We have dog stories to share, and he, in his Pulitzer book that he gave us, he wrote stories about playing golf with my husband and my dog, the aircraft carrier Bear. And I just wanted to say that Chris sent me the Road to Little Dribbling, and you forgot to mention Haverford Friends when you come to religion. And my Matt's daughter introduced me to the preludes to Peter Pan, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I'm still a kid.
Susie, thank you for calling in. A lot of inside baseball talk there.
Good to
Mr.
hear
Barry.
from you. Her husband, Paul, I did not know he'd passed away. I feel bad about that. Was a banker and a golfer, and he tried to get me to play golf. And golf is, let's be honest, the stupidest sport ever, and not the super single activity, human activity. But he kept trying to get me to. And the only part about golf, I like two things. I like driving the golf cart, and I like drinking beer. You can drink beer while you're playing golf, which you can't do with, like, I don't know, scuba diving. So those are the things I liked about it. The part where you try to find the stupid ball after you hit it, I don't get that at all.
Speaking of sports,
I would go like, Paul, you go find the ball. I'm going to sit here on the cart and drink the beer.
you write about visiting Brazil for World Cup, and everything we read about Brazil, is it true?
I love Brazil. I went there for the World Cup, and then I went there again for the Olympics. And the thing is, when you say you're going to Brazil, if you live in Miami, there's a lot of Brazilians here. I know a lot of Brazilians, and I love them. They're wonderful people. They're just wonderful people. But they all say the same thing. You know, you say, oh, I'm going to Brazil. They go, oh, great, it's gonna, I love you, gonna love it. Don't wear any jewelry. Don't carry any money. You know, and then I start reading about it, and it's like, you're gonna probably be robbed at knife point. So you should carry, and I'm not kidding. The travel book says you should carry a fake wallet to give them, or a little throwaway money to give them, and hide your real money in your sock. And so like when I got there the first time, my daughter Sophie and my wife was off covering an event. So when Sophie and I got there, and so I had all these secret pockets, and I had money ready to give them. Like any Brazilian to come within 10 feet of me, I'd have thrown money at them. Just like, they wouldn't even have to show me, just a picture of a knife, and I would have. But nothing like that happened. Everybody was so nice, So my daughter Sophie and I realized we could make some money down there by meeting Americans coming off the plane and robbing them at knife point, because I know they'd all be ready to give us money. It would be the easiest thing in the world. That's a little tip for you college students out there looking for work.
Dave is calling from West Palm Beach, Florida. Dave, you're on the air.
Hey, Dave. How you doing? Big fan. I first discovered you on the Paul and Young Ron show. I know you're a big Walking Dead fan. So just wondering if, A, you think the show's jumped the shark, and two, B, I guess, how do you think that movies and zombie movies, horror movies, have they influenced your writing in any way?
Well, as far as The Walking Dead, I'm a big fan of the zombie show, The Walking Dead. Yeah, it kind of has jumped the shark, but I don't care. I'm committed to it now, forever and ever. The only question I have about The Walking Dead is if these people have been walking around dead for 7 years now, how come their clothes have not all fallen off? They should all be naked, and that's unrealistic. We need more realism in our zombie show. What was the other question? I don't remember the second part. Oh, have horror movies influenced my? Nah, not really, except in this, making fun of them. I grew up during the 50s, the age of really cheesy horror movies like the Mysterians and all the Godzilla movies. And I loved them as a kid. I loved them. But I mean, I just made fun of them. Now, horror movies are like really horrible. So I generally don't watch them.
How much attention do you pay to what goes on in Washington?
Speaking of horror movies, a lot. I mean, I read the New York Times, the Miami Herald, and the Wall Street Journal every day, and I watch TV, and I watch. But I don't write about it much. I kind of save it up for the year in review that I do every year. But I pay attention,
We've got a few minutes left with our guest, Dave Barry, here at Books and Books Bookstore in Coral Gables, Florida, and Charles in Roswell, Georgia is up next.
Hey, Dave, big fan. Like your writing style a lot. And another person I'm really fond of is PJ, your work. I think that you guys seem to be cut from the same satirical cloth and political bent. I was wondering, are you guys buddies? Do you hang out? Do you correspond?
Yes. PJ is a friend, and he lives in New Hampshire, so I don't see him that often. But we're friends. We do correspond. He sends me very, very funny emails. And whenever we are in the same general area, we do get together and consume adult beverages and discuss political issues of importance. No, he's a very funny guy, and he's a really nice guy.
James, Burlingame, California. Hi, James. James, you with us? Burlingame, California?
Yes.
If not, let's try
Dave.
Michelle.
Huge fan, Dave, from California. Thank you. And Dave, I am not making this up. You do have fans in California.
Good to hear.
By the way, one of your favorite parts of the book is when as soon as you say, "And I am not making this up," then we know something amazing is and humorous is coming after. One question is, you wrote in a hilarious book, Dave Barry Turns 40, and you wrote another one, Dave Barry Turns 50. You skipped 60. I notice you're turning 70 this year. Will you write Dave Barry Turns 70?
I'm going to write about dogs. I kind of got, everything I write more or less ends up in being involved with the fact that I'm getting old, because I'm very aware of that. But I'm writing a book about dogs that will, the premise of the book is, I have a 10-year-old dog named Lucy. She and I are both turning 70. She in dog years, I in human years. And that will be kind of the premise of the book. If I knew more about it, I would tell you more about it. But instead of writing it, I'm on television with this guy for hours. So I don't have time to write anything anymore. My writing career is over.
I think you've turned 75 in the
Well,
time.
we're just sitting here, yeah.
Sitting here. Do you feel 70?
I don't know, because I am, so I must, right? I don't think anybody really believes inside him that he's as old as he really is. It's like, when I really notice it is, I went to my high school reunion last summer, my, 800th high school, and 50-something, 50th, and you walk in there and like, oh my God, who are these people? And they're lurching around to some song by Freddie and the Dreamers, and like, oh my God. Then you realize that's you, that's who you are, I can't deny it. So, yeah, I guess I am. I guess I feel older, especially when I get down on the ground and then try to get back up. That's like almost impossible to me, and I used to do it very easily, now I can't.
Any other audience questions before we go back to phone calls? I see no hands. So let's hear from Michelle in Humble, Texas. Michelle, hi.
Hi. Hi, Dave, and thank you so much for your work and for doing this program. And I just wanted to mention one of my favorites of your books is Dave Barry's Guide to Guys, and it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, that book is it's remained popular. Basically, the premise is that it's for women to understand guys, and basically says it's kind of like having a relationship with a Labrador Retriever, to have a relationship with a guy. In other words, the whole point of the book is to women, lower your standards, and it seems to resonate. Yeah.
Audrey, Bangor, Maine. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, you guys. Every time I see crabgrass, Dave, I think of you. I just love it, and without you. I just have a quick question. I just want to wonder. I've been wondering why were you on the Oscars? I mean, I saw you several years ago on the Oscars, and you were there, and I was like, "There's Dave Barry at the Oscars." Why were you there?
Well, I don't know that I was on them. I wrote for the Oscars twice when Steve Martin was the host. I was one of the writers. But I don't know that I was ever on camera at the Oscars. If I was, it was some horrible mistake because I'm supposed to be backstage, although I did have a tuxedo. Maybe they just thought I looked good.
Is Steve Martin, is he part of the guest temporary Rock Bottom Remainders?
Steve Martin has, in fact, been on stage with us briefly, but Steve is a really good musician. So he's a really smart guy, so he knows better than to stay on stage with the Rock Bottom Remainder. We have had, however, on stage with us Roger McGuinn of the Byrds many times. He performs with us regularly. What's his name? You know, the guy. Bruce Springsteen played with the Rock Bottom Remainders one time. And Warren Zevon, the late Warren Zevon, used to perform with us a lot. So we've had some real musicians. It never rubs off on us, though.
Where did the name come from?
Well, a remainder in the book business is a book that doesn't sell. It's usually a hardcover book, and they have a lot left over. They almost always do. They print more than they need, and so they put it in that bin at the front of the, and it's, instead of $19.99, it's 99 cents, and those are called remainders. And so this kind of a title making fun of ourselves called the Rock Bottom Remainders. It was Roy Blunt Jr., I believe, who came up with the name.
Wayne's in Macon, Georgia. Hi, Wayne.
How you doing? I'm sorry, I tuned in a little late, so if you've covered this before, please do it again. Dave, can you share with us your web address? And the second question is, have you ever been to Macon, Georgia? And if not, why not?
I've been to, okay, first of all, my web address would be I just Google it, but davebarry.com, and then there's a blog and stuff. Macon, I don't know. I've been to Georgia. Does that count? I mean, it's, is Macon near Atlanta? I don't know. Yeah, I've been to Macon. It's great.
Jane in Olympia, Washington. And before we hear from Jane in Olympia, Washington, do you blog every day?
Yeah, I do. My blog is not really, I don't write much for it. What I do is people send me stuff, and this kind of is a holdover from when I had a newspaper column, and often I would write about weird news items people would send in. Even after I stopped writing my column, people kept sending me stuff, so I put it up on the blog. So if a toilet explodes anywhere in the world, it's probably going to appear on my blog. A lot of toilet-related news. Snake appears in the toilet, which happens more than you might think. Look down before you pee, people. So I throw lots of stuff on there. I don't write a lot, though, for it.
Do you spend any time in schools?
Yeah.
Teaching seminars?
I would not call it teaching. No. Sometimes when I have a book out for kids, I will go on a tour while I go to various schools. And it's always kind of interesting. Kids are not like, adults tend to be much more worshipful of authors and polite, and kids are not like that. This is an example from a school here in Miami. I gave this, presentation on my book, and then the teacher says, "It's great, we have the author here, and everything is okay. Who has a question?" And the girl raises her hand. I go, "Yes." What? She goes, "Do you know you have like big wet stains in your armpits?" And of course I did. Kids are so truthful. So I had her expelled. No, I didn't. We just used a cattle prod, and it was done. No, that's wrong. Don't do that.
Jane, Olympia, Washington, thanks for holding. You're on with Dave Barry.
Hi, I'm a longtime fan. Enjoyed the show so far. I was fascinated to hear of your fondness of historical novels, and I was wondering what you think, if you think anything at all, or if you'd ever read you were aware of the phenomena and had ever read the Outlander series.
No, I have not. Sorry. That's not really a historical novel, is it?
Some people think it is, yeah.
But isn't it science fiction?
Oh, no. No, it's about Scottish Revolution, Culloden, and all that sort of stuff.
All right, thank you, Jane.
I'm sorry, I don't know about the Outlander then.
What are you reading right now? What's at the bedside?
The book I just finished was The Road to Little Dribbling by Bill Bryson, which was a follow-up on his first England book. And he goes back again and use it. And then I'm reading a bunch of books about dogs because I'm writing about dogs.
Time for a few more calls. Let's hear from Carol in Albertville, Alabama.
Hi, Dave. It's great to be talking to you. I noticed that you're going to be the judge next year for the Irma Bombeck writing contest. I tried my best, and I did not win last time. So I'm wondering if you might have a tip on winning, or maybe you can give me like a secret word so you'd know it was me, and then you could, tell everybody what a great writer I am. What do you think?
By the way, that's Carol in Albertville, Alabama.
Probably the best way would be for you to send me some currency. No, I am a Irma Bombeck. I was fortunate enough to know Irma Bombeck, and she was one of those. Not only was she a really funny writer, but she was a really just funny person. So I was honored to be asked to do this. I hate doing it, though. I hate doing contests. I hate judging. I don't do this. People are always asking me, like, I wrote this, will you read it? I wrote this, will you read it? And I don't, because you want to be nice. And so I never want to say anything, even if I don't like it, I don't want to say anything about it. Second of all, I don't have time really to be doing it. But this, they asked me to do it because it was for Irma Bombeck's organization. I said, yeah, but it will be difficult because inevitably, it comes down to what you think, what you like, what you find amusing, which isn't necessarily the same as what everybody else in the world would. But I'm sure that if I do receive money from that lady in the mail, she'll get a special look. But it has to be a lot of money. I have principles.
Dave Barry slept here, a sort of history of the United States. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but how much work went into that?
I'll tell you exactly what I did. This is when my son was like, 7, 8 years old. So I had a babysitter, and she would come over with her school books. She was a high school student, and I started reading her history textbook. And I just thought it was hilarious. It wasn't meant to be funny, but it was like every single thing that ever happened, they had to make sure there was one woman and one minority group involved, before even if they really had to force it in there. And so I started to write a parody of it, and it was easy. I basically just took that book and parodized it, and that became this book.
Well, I'm just wondering if there was a lot of free association or free thought in this, because
no thought, no.
Part of what you write is the highest ranking officer in the government is the president, who is elected to a 4-year term after a 3-year, 9-month campaign in which he is required to state that he has a vision and plans to provide leadership. The president's primary duties are to get on helicopters, bitch about Congress, and send the vice president abroad to frown with sorrow at the remains of deceased foreign leaders.
Well, that is the job of the president.
How long would it take to write that paragraph?
I don't know. I would say that paragraph, 43 minutes.
This separation of powers.
Okay, this one's a little bit longer.
Creates a system of checks and balances, which protects everybody by ensuring that any action taken by one part of the government will be rendered utterly meaningless by an equal and opposite reaction from some other part.
Yeah, it's like, that isn't even a joke.
All right, Gary in Jefferson City, Missouri, we're listening.
I've enjoyed your writing over the years. You mentioned not being particularly political, but I remember some very insightful pieces you wrote about the federal deficit. I think we could probably all stand some comic relief from what's going on these days in Washington. Would you consider updating some of those and making them a little more current for us? I know we'd all appreciate it.
I have thought about it. This would be a good time probably to go to D.C. because it's crazy right now. And I might do that. I might go up there and write about it, just to do it. If I can. I have to get them to let me into the White House. If there's anybody watching in the White House, Donald, I know you are. I would probably be making fun of him, though, so maybe not.
All right, we have time for one more call for Dave Barry, and that is Stu in Sarasota, Florida. Hi, Stu.
Yes, Dave. I'm a retired school principal, middle school, and I was wondering if you tormented your teachers or your principals when you were growing up in school. Thank you.
I will say this, that I was something of a wise ass, believe it or not, in school, and I did have some discipline issues sometimes not because I was bad exactly, but because I felt a need to entertain the other students, and more than once I was told by a teacher, "That's very funny, David, but you can't joke your way through life." Turns out that that's not true. You can.
You're kind of the underachiever among your siblings, aren't you?
Yeah, well, what do you mean? In the sense of never having done productive work, yeah.
No, I mean, you have some relatively prominent siblings.
Who would they be? I know all my siblings by heart. And relatively prominent does not mean I love them both. All of them, 3 of them, but who do you think I am?
You know,
long interview now.
Bet I looked at your Wikipedia page. I made it through 3 hours there. So, all right, that might have been it. Dave Barry has been our guest for the last 3 hours here at Books and Books in Coral Gable, Florida. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
We appreciate Books and Books hosting this event. We appreciate y'all coming out to see this. Dave Barry Talks Back came out in 1992. Dave Barry Does Japan, 1993. Dave Barry Is Not Making This Up, 94. In 1997 came Dave Barry's Greatest Hits. Dave Barry Slept Here, 1997. Another book with the name Dave Barry in it, Dave Barry Hits Below the Beltway, came out in 2002. Dave Barry's Money Secrets in 2006.
Why are you doing this?
Dave Barry's History of the Millennium So Far came out in 2007. His most recent books, I'll Mature When I'm Dead, came out about 7 years ago. Live Right and Find Happiness came out 2 years ago. And finally, his most recent, Best State Ever, A Florida Man Defends His Homeland. You're watching Book TV on C-SPAN 2, and this has been In Depth. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.